be called to order. First on the agenda, we have Senate File 856, Senator Gustafson's bill. I think Senator Kreun is also joining. Welcome to the committee. Senator Gustafson, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to find you. So thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I'm honored to present SF 856, and I want to thank my co-authors, Senator Draheim, Senator Putnam, Senator Latz, and especially Senator Kreun, who is joining me to co-present this bill today. It's a bill that will establish an independent office of the Inspector General to strengthen oversight, enhance accountability, and prevent fraud, waste, and misuse in Minnesota's public programs. We all agree that taxpayer dollars must be spent efficiently and that fraud against our state programs is unacceptable. Minnesota families carefully manage their budgets, and they expect our government to do the same. SF 856 builds on the meaningful steps we've taken in recent years and ensures a dedicated, ongoing effort to combat fraud while improving transparency in state operations. Why 856 is necessary. Fraud and misuse of public funds harm the very people our programs are designed to serve. While state agency-specific inspectors currently exist within certain departments, our approach streamlines and strengthens oversight by creating a centralized, independent office that operates outside the executive branch agencies but works in coordination with them. The legislation ensures that the Inspector General has the necessary tools to investigate fraud, misuse of public funds while maintaining collaboration with agency programs administrators. Establish strong interagency agreements to avoid duplicative investigations and protect federal funding, increase efficiency and oversight of grants and financial transactions to safeguard taxpayer dollars. We have worked closely with stakeholders, including MMB, to address concerns about federal compliance, agency coordination, and investigative authority. Amendments adopted through the process have clarified the OIG's jurisdiction to prevent duplication of investigations, has ensured Medicaid fraud and licensing oversight remain with appropriate agencies to meet federal requirements, established formal collaboration mechanisms between the OIG and the OLA and other state agencies. While we appreciate the continued engagement, we look forward to continuing this work, and I look forward to hearing from my colleagues today. And if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, Senator Kreun may have a few words.
Senator Kreun, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee members, for the invitation. Minnesota, as we all know, has a fraud problem. This bill is a meaningful, bipartisan solution to that problem. And I want to stress the bipartisan nature of this bill, and thank Senator Gustafson for bringing this bill and working on this bill in a truly bipartisan manner and a bicameral manner as well to show the seriousness of not just the problem but the solution. This isn't about scoring political points at this point. It's about solving problems and making sure that we eliminate the fraud problem that we have here in Minnesota. And at every step of the way, we have made adjustments. We have taken input from other members, from agencies, to make sure that this bill is workable, to make sure that this bill is effective. And even if we don't agree on every single aspect of this bill, we want to have a solution that we all feel will make a difference in combating fraud in Minnesota. So I'm happy to be here today and with Senator Gustafson answer any specific questions you have relating to this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kreun. Before we go to member question discussion, I also have Christy Grom with the Department of Human Services on the list to testify. Is Ms. Grom here?
Yeah, she's, I don't think she.
Oh, okay. Senator Gustafson, I think members here in the committee have an A39 amendment. I don't know if you want to speak to that amendment or if any member wants to move that amendment. Senator Wickland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm bringing that amendment forward, the A39. I'd like to move the A39 amendment.
Senator Wickland moves the A39 amendment. It's before the committee. Senator Wickland, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last week, the bill before us was heard in my committee, the HHS committee, and there were a few items that we talked about in there, and we had some amendments that we made to the bill, but a couple of them were done fairly quickly right before the hearing, and so this amendment contains some items that we needed to add because of what we learned after the committee. And then it also has some recommendations that came from the agencies, from DCYF. And Ms. Hoffman-Litchie is here, Senate Counsel from my committee, and she is willing to walk through the amendment, and then that will help members understand the different items in it, if we could do that.
Thank you, Senator Wickland. We'll go to Senate Counsel to do a walkthrough of the A39.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Allie Hoffman-Litchie. I'm Senate Counsel with the Health and Human Services Committee, and this is just in my jurisdiction, so lucky me. Lines 1.2 of the amendment to 1.10, they require the OIG to establish and maintain an exclusion list that agencies can access. This list must include individuals and programs that the OIG has made a recommendation under Clause 7, which is to freeze or withhold funding to these programs or agencies. And it would just allow the agencies, specifically DCYF and DHS, to access this information in order to do their own fraud and misuse investigations related to Medicaid or CCAP. Lines 1.11 to 1.16, those cleanup changes related to the amendment adopted in the Health and Human Services Committee. This just adds the Department of Health into the data provisions and data sharing. And then it also changes abuse to misuse. And these were just missed in the last minute amendments last week. Lines 1.17 to 1.29, those modify the list of DCYF employees that are excluded from transferring to the new department based on technical assistance from DCYF. And then lines 1.30 to 2.5, this clarifies that the interagency agreements can't contain language that supersedes the current language in the bill without the express written consent of each commissioner prior to each investigation. Lines 2.6 through 3.19, this makes a conforming change with the exclusion list. It modifies the definition within the DCYF statute of credible allegation of fraud to include information from the Inspector General, which would then allow the commissioner to withhold payments based on that information. Lines 3.20 to 3.25 is just another conforming Department of Health change. It requires the Department of Health to provide any final inspection reports to the Inspector General that are not within the jurisdiction of the Inspector General.
Mr. Chair, I don't, sorry to mean to interrupt. We don't have copies of the amendment. Is there a chance that we could get 2 copies?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Gustafson. If the pages could distribute the A39 amendment to the table, that'd be great. Thank you. Ms. Hoffman, please continue. Ms. Hoffman, we're going to wait until Senator Gustafson and Senator Kreun have copies.
Chair,
Senator Hoffman.
this is the reason. Our committee administrator didn't get the amendment until like 2:50 this afternoon. So I just, when we're doing these things like that, it just is a prime example of people, if you're going to, do that thing, I'm not going to call out a certain department out there, but they should have gotten their stuff to us in a more of a meaningful, timely manner. So I'm glad that, once again, this committee shows how flexible we are and how we just get our work done. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman. Senator Gustafson, do you and Senator Kreun have copies of the amendment? Ms. Hoffman, if you could continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. The last portion of the bill is lines 3.26 through the end. This is the same changes as on lines 2.6 to 3.19 regarding the definition of credible allegation of fraud. This one is just within the DHS statute. The previous one was in the DCYF statute. and that is the amendment. I am more than willing to go through any repeat of page and lines if the authors would like.
I guess while the bill authors maybe have a chance to review, I did just have one question, Ms. Hoffman. When we look at the changes on, and I'm looking at the A39, page 1, line 20 and 21, is that effectively making it so that this proposed Office of Inspector General would not be able to have any oversight over CCAP?
Mr. Chair, those lines in particular state that those employees do not transfer to the new department. However, under the current bill language, with the amendment adopted last week in the Health and Human Services Committee, the Inspector General on page, in the fourth engrossment of Senate File 856, lines 5.30 through 6.2, that is where the jurisdiction is carved out. So they do not have the authority or jurisdiction over the CCAP program to investigate.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. So my understanding is basically, regardless of if the A39 is adopted, the bill as before the committee does not include CCAP as a program that they could review.
Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Thank you. Senator Gustafson, Senator Kreun, are you ready to respond, or I have some more questions I could ask as well?
Mr. Chair, I can respond.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clear up that while the jurisdiction stays where it is according to the bill, the Inspector General will also receive concurrently a report along with the agency about the investigation, any investigation that happens within that agency. And it is also worth noting that if you look at the jurisdiction of the Inspector General, they must operate independently of all state executive agencies and report directly to the Chief Administrative Law Judge. But the Inspector General also will have access to any data necessary should a reason present itself. So they are still that independent oversight authority that is true to the bill while still maintaining the federal requirements within HHS that ensures that we get federal funding and are respecting the federal law.
Senator McEwen.
So I'm sorry it's late.
I'm sorry, Senator, I called on Senator McEwen.
Oh, sorry.
But I'll put you on the
Go
list.
ahead, Senator Abler, it's
My
fine.
ears are going bad, so.
Senator McEwen. Senator Abler.
Sorry, it just sounded like that, so I apologize. We're twins. So just to understand, so I'm still sorry I'm late and sorry I can't hear. This amendment's got a timestamp of 155. Can you just help me understand the origin of it, please?
Senator Wickland. Mr. Chair, Senator Abler, the origin of it is it came out of committee work done on Thursday or last week when we heard the bill, and then we realized after that there were certain items that were not included that should have been. And Ms. Litchie, or Ms. Hoffman-Litchie can point out exactly which ones those are, as opposed to ones that came from a different source. The reason, so we worked on an amendment on Friday. I sent an amendment to Senator Gustafson with the changes last night. And then today we were trying to get everything organized. Information was going both to Senator Gustafson directly from the agencies and to Senate Council. And so bringing it all together in one amendment was challenging. And so that's why it didn't, get done until this afternoon. So it's not any intent that we didn't want people to know about it. Senator Gustafson was made aware of it, most of it last night. And again, like I say, that we can have Senate Council differentiate between the items that came from that process and the others that came from DCYF as a separate request stream. So.
Well, thank you.
Senator Abler.
And so, actually, there are many topics moving around, and on this one, I've actually kind of just set aside because of the efforts of the bipartisan group being led by the two authors there and a bevy of others. They're coordinating it. So it just seemed like the author might have been surprised by this, and I'm not going to ask her that she was or not, but it's a hard place to do business sometimes. I just wanted to comment about that. And with these substantial amendments, it's just nice to make sure the author has a chance to sort it all out. So maybe that was true. So maybe I'll just let it go with that. But this is a place where there's just sometimes a cloak of necessary, delays and all that. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize if I wasn't totally following it. So in the HHS committee, we did add some amendments to clarify around the separations to make sure that we're abiding by our federal requirements. And this is just kind of seeking to kind of finish that up. Am I hearing that correctly? And maybe I should ask you, Senator Gustafson. But since we have the chair here as well, I just want to make sure I'm understanding that. Senator
Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, the question, could you repeat the question again?
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From when I was listening, there were amendments made in HHS to kind of clarify the separation to make sure that we're still complying with federal requirements. And then this amendment was to close that loop.
Senator Gustafson.
Mr. Chair, yes, that is. I had a different version of it, but there was a little bit more added to it, but I think from what I'm reading here, it is just closing that loop. So yes, if that answers your question.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what I really want to be sure of, because I think this is the last place that this bill will come to a committee that I sit on where I can ask this question, but I want to make sure, because everything we do in this committee is so complex. There's state, federal, county, and so I just want to make sure that we are really drawing those clear lines. I don't need DHS to come up to the testifying table, but a nod even would help me be sure that we feel like we've done due diligence around this. I don't need assurances. You can't assure anything, but I just want to make sure that we've kind of crossed the T's, dotted the I's.
Senator McEwen, I'm going to ask
Thank you.
Ms. Grom to come to the table and we can ask some questions because I have some questions as well.
Okay.
Ms. Grom, welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record, and then I'll recognize Senator McEwen to restate her question.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Christy Grom with the Department of Human Services.
Senator McEwen,
Thank you, Mr.
restate your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Grom, I just want to make sure that, we've done HHS, we're in Human Services, and so as this bill leaves here, I just want to make sure we've kind of done our due diligence to make sure we've drawn that bright line around our departments and agencies that we need to as it pertains to federal requirements when it comes to insert your program there. Have we accomplished it, or are we considering all the language that would accomplish that?
Ms. Grom.
Mr. Chair, Senator McEwen, we have worked with Senator Gustafson and other co-authors since the introduction, and I think maybe even prior to the introduction of this bill. So we've made a lot of progress on the pieces that pertain particularly to Medicaid. And as Senator Wickland mentioned, we made some amendments in her committee, and you've mentioned that as well, to really differentiate who's going to investigate and whose role it is to investigate Medicaid matters, which helps us to clarify some of the potential federal risks that we had previously. We are still analyzing the bill in full to make sure that everything is just the way we need it to be, but we anticipate continuing to work with Senator Gustafson to get things in order. This particular amendment isn't one that I've seen. And so we would need to spend some more time looking at the changes, particularly in 245.095, and just make sure that it all lines up as it needs to make sure that the independent OIG has the authority that they need and that there aren't any federal implications. I would say the piece that DHS, one of the pieces that DHS is trying to still work on, just as a clarification in the interagency agreements, and Senate Council may be able to clarify, but we just wanted to make sure that with those agreements that they align with the previous portions of the bill. So we'll continue to work with the bill author on that.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ms. Grom, is there a federal OIG at DHS now that we work with at the state level? And if not, is there a reason to maybe pursue being able to do OIG work at the state level if it's not happening at the federal level?
Ms. Kreun?
Mr. Chair, Senator McQuaid, there is a federal Office of Inspector General at the Department of Health and Human Services. We do work with them for technical assistance. They provide guidance. I'm not sure I understand the second half of your question about what that might mean for the state level OIG.
That's fine.
Statewide.
That's fine.
Senator McQuaid, any follow-up?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you. I might have some more questions, but I want to let others ask.
Thank you. I have a question, Ms. Kreun, just to make sure I understand. So I have a letter here. That's dated March 11th from Temporary Commissioner Gandhi at DHS, effectively expressing concerns over the proposal before the committee. And I just wanted to ask, have those concerns been addressed? Are they open, or will they be addressed by the amendment here today?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. I think that the concerns have been partially addressed with the amendments that occurred in Senate Health and Human Services Committee last week. And I think the clarifications that I mentioned with regard to the interagency agreement in that letter, I think we mentioned that that section reintroduced just some confusion, I think, and we just wanted to make sure that everything was clear, that in those interagency agreements for potentially duplicative investigations, that those investigations or that those interagency agreements did not apply to the Medicaid investigations, which were previously exempted in the bill. So that's a clarification we're seeking, and we have our policy and legal team reviewing the rest of the bill just to make sure that we are solidly understanding what the intent is and then how we would implement it and fiscal note it.
And Ms. Kreun, just one question for me, and then I have a few other members who have wanted to ask some questions. For the bill before the committee, within the Human Services jurisdiction, are there any portions of our Human Services budget before the committee that this Office of Inspector General wouldn't be able to investigate and take a look at potential misuse, fraud allegations?
Mr. Chair, I don't have the bill in front of me right now, but I believe the bill currently in the current engrossment before the committee says that the statewide Office of Inspector General that would be established under this bill does not have jurisdiction over Medicaid, investigating Medicaid matters, as well as DHS licensing and background study issues. So those are the items that were sort of carved out in the last committee.
And so, Ms. Kreun, just to make sure I understand that, so, I mean, that would be the vast majority of this committee's jurisdiction, right? If we take waivered services, long-term care, anything that touches state Medicaid, is my understanding correct? That this OIG wouldn't be able to investigate allegations of fraud within that area?
Mr. Chair, I think there are certainly other aspects at the department that the OIG may have jurisdiction over, but we are doing a full analysis to understand precisely what those areas are. For example, Minnesota Care isn't Medicaid, and that's not mentioned in this bill. There could be other programs as well that this committee would have jurisdiction over. But happy to provide you that clarification. I'm sorry it's not as clear as you would like it at this moment in the committee stop.
Thank you, Ms. Kreun. I appreciate it. I have a few other members who have questions. Senator Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I have a question for the department, too. I have an associate who has worked for quite a few decades, he's retired now, in the fraud of banks and investment companies. And he's been in contact with me, and he has become a student of state agencies, okay, rightly or wrongly. Anyway, so he has his opinions. But one of the things he brings out as far as fraud is concerned is that there is software out there that can aid the agencies in detecting fraud. And yet, as I look at this bill, unless I'm missing something, or the amendment, I don't see where the agency is encouraged to use up-to-date, helpful software to help them identify the fraud and get on top of it as soon as possible. What are your thoughts?
Senator Gruenhagen, I don't know if Senator Gustafson or Ms. Kreun want to take that Senator Gustafson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Gruenhagen. There are lots of tools that are already being used and have been even before the establishment of this office to do that. In fact, there are things that the BCA is doing right now in accordance with the executive order from Governor Walz, but that's not part of this bill. This is just the Office of Inspector General and carving out what areas they are able to investigate. So the specific tools they use will be up to that office and in conjunction with the agencies, but it wouldn't be spelled out in this bill.
Senator Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thanks for that response, Senator Governor. The only thing I'd say is that the associate that has been in touch with me says little, if any, agencies are using the proper up-to-date software to aid in helping them identify fraud as soon as possible. That's his concern. Again, he has a lot of experience in that area, so I just throw that out to the department, especially that a lot of this stuff can be gotten on top of very quickly if we utilize the current software to identify that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Green. Second, Senator Utke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm kind of going back to where you started a while back here, and that was on line 5.30, where it carves out CCAP, and then now I hear the carve out for investigating Medicaid and licensing. If that is not under the jurisdiction of the Inspector General, who is? I mean, I just want to have comfort that we have, when we talk fraud and trying to clean this up a little bit, those are some of the areas that are always on the headlines. Who is going to have jurisdiction over that, and how do we know that? I mean, to me, the Inspector General is the place where it should fall. Can you help clarify that some?
Senator Gustafson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Utke. So you're right, but we are under the constraints of a federal regulation that says there's a federal law that says there has to be a separate auditor or inspector general in each state that specifically looks at these programs and Medicare, Medicaid, and some of the other ones that we've outlined here. And that's one that's a federal statute, but it's also something that links us to being able to get that federal funding. So we want to honor that. But I want to point out that this doesn't mean that the Inspector General doesn't have any authority or that they don't have the power to do something. If you look at line 5.20, page 5, it says, alerting relevant commissioners or heads of agencies on an emergency basis before an investigation is concluded that the Inspector General has a reasonable suspicion that fraud or misuse is being committed, with a recommendation to freeze or cease distribution of funds. That's something that other people who are in the work of trying to identify and stop fraud or misuse of funds aren't able to do at this point. And so it's, that is another area where we know that this would fill a gap that is currently missing. Also, this isn't to say that they can't investigate an agency if they suspect that there might be some misuse, but it is, it just means that anything that's under the jurisdiction of those that we have carved out in the bill falls under what we are comfortable with, in making sure that we are also honoring the federal statute that is going to, quite frankly, outrank us here. And if Senator Kreun might have more to add to this, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair. Or not, sorry.
Senator Kreun.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, the exceptions that are listed in the fourth engrossment, 5.24 to 6.15, I believe were done at the last stop in HHS. I do not believe they were in the third engrossment. And so the question would be whether federal law prohibits a state inspector general, such as the one we're proposing here, from having any jurisdiction over those investigations, or does federal law simply require that the agencies maintain jurisdiction over those investigations? It's not entirely clear to me what the answer is. Certainly, if it is the former, then these exceptions would be appropriate. But if it's the latter, in my view, they wouldn't be, because the Office of Inspector General, in my view, should have concurrent jurisdiction over these investigations. And I do not believe that these exceptions should limit the jurisdiction of the Office of Inspector General. To be sure, the employees that are currently conducting these investigations would need to stay where they are and not be transferred to the Office of Inspector General. But in my view, the Office of Inspector General should have concurrent jurisdiction, so there's some redundancy over these programs. And so I do not support the exceptions that are in the fourth engrossment, to be perfectly honest with you. Now, if they are required by federal law, and council can state that unequivocally, that we would be at loss at federal funding or be in violation of federal law, if the new Office of Inspector General had concurrent jurisdiction over these investigations, that would change my tune.
Thank you, Senator Kreun. Senator Rucky, follow up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Kreun, because I think we're on the same page there. I don't like what I'm seeing. Yeah, we alert the commissioner. Frankly, I don't have a lot of confidence in that, because that's where a lot of this has been coming out of year after year. I want the Inspector General to have some authority and have some teeth to be able to do these things. So I would hope that as we move forward with discussions on this, that we do look at, I'm hearing about the federal oversight of this, that we thoroughly check that out and get this ramped up to the highest level possible, because that's why we're creating this office, or, working with this office, is to have the authority to reel in the fraud that we constantly hear, over the years. It's been way too many times, and the names that we're carving out are very concerning. So I would hope that this continues to get looked at and worked on, and that we tighten this up some, because I don't like what I'm seeing.
Senator Uckey, thank you. Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Uckey. I did get this amendment late, and if it helps the committee, this does, and so Senator McEwen was saying she wouldn't see it again, but it's coming back to state local gov I believe this week. So we will take a look at that. We'll continue to work on it. I'd also invite you to come to our Tuesday meetings where we are working through a lot of this language as well. So, but we are going to be working on this through at least 3 more committee stops.
Senator Uckey, follow up.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick, you mentioned 3 more stops. Where are the stops, and where does this end? Where's the committee of jurisdiction?
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it will go to state local gov, it will go to rules, it will go to finance, and possibly back to judiciary.
Senator Wickland.
Mr. Chair, I just want to comment that some of the objections or the concerns that are being raised are in the engrossed bill that's before us. That change, some of those changes were made last week in HHS, and the changes were made based on investigation by the agencies telling us what was going to happen if we weren't able to define more specifically how Medicaid fraud investigations, CCAP fraud investigations are handled. And so that is why the language was written the way it was. If it needs to be modified, or if there's more discussions that happen and it needs to be clarified further, that's fine. But that was what we discussed and why we discussed it in HHS. The amendment doesn't change that. It's doing other things. So I just wanted to make sure we're clear on where the exceptions came and how we got to them. It was with consultation with the Department of Human Services and the Department of Children, Youth, and Families.
Thank you, Senator Wickland. One question I have on the A39 that's in front of us here is, if we look at page 2, line 1 through line 5, it talks about these interagency agreements that, from my reading, basically that the Inspector General would not be allowed to assume jurisdiction without the express written consent of the Commissioner of Human Services or Children, Youth, and Families before each potential investigation. And I think the word, especially each potential investigation, really stuck out to me. And I guess my concern would be with this amendment language, does it effectively give these agencies a mechanism for blocking this Office of Inspector General from looking over their shoulder and ensuring that we don't have instances of fraud? And I guess my broader concern with, whether it's the amendment or the bill in front of us is that at least this committee, and we had a hearing on it, unfortunately, we've seen fraud within substance use disorder areas. We've seen misuse of funds. And so I guess I'm just worried that whether it's with the bill or the A39, that this just will make it so that this Office of Inspector General isn't able to really engage in a robust way over the human services fraud that many of us are concerned about. So I don't know if Senator Wickland or Senator Gustafson have any response to that or thoughts, or if I'm misreading that section. Senator Wickland.
Mr. Chair, I think the lines that you're referencing, 2.1 through 2.5, they fit in on page 14. And I don't know if Ms. Hoffman-Litchie would be willing to describe more how they connect with the interagency agreement language that we added. That would be helpful.
Ms. Hoffman.
Mr. Chair, committee, so this language ties in with the interagency agreement language and is in the amendment to try and alleviate some of the agency's concerns that an interagency agreement could theoretically supersede anything that's in the current language of the bill. Mr. Chair, I believe your reading is correct of the language. They would need, the new OIG would need to get the consent of each commissioner, of the respective commissioner, before each potential investigation.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Members, we do have the A39 amendment in front of us. Any additional comments or questions from members before we go to a vote? Okay. All those in favor of the adoption of the A39 amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. No. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Okay, we have Senator Gruenhagen's requested division. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. With 5 votes in favor, 4 opposed, the motion prevails and the A39 is adopted. Members, any further amendments, discussion, questions to the bill as amended? I just, Senator Gustafson, Senator Kreun, I mean, I guess I like the concept and I like the idea of this bill. And I think we're hearing very loud and clear from Minnesotans that they have concerns around public services fraud, much of which has been, unfortunately, within programs that are under the jurisdiction of this committee. And especially we've seen very large scale and repeat examples of fraud, especially within substance use disorder programs. And I guess my concern is with the bill as adopted, do we actually see this improving the situation of these human services programs, or have we kind of been insulated, these agencies, from the proper oversight that would address the concerns that a bipartisan group of members have raised on this issue? Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say that this, in addition to places like the OLA, the FBI, the AG's office, this is all a team effort. And there are multiple ways that you can address fraud and shut it down. Some of those things have to fall within agencies. Some of that was what we're discussing here today. And some of that can fall into a new office, like the Office of Inspector General. What the Office of Inspector General does that is not being done already is having that independent oversight authority to be able to fill in a gap on the proactive side, the investigation side, that neither the OLA or other agencies have been able to do so far. They would have the jurisdiction to shut down a payment immediately and recommend that publicly to the commissioner. Those are some of the things that we found were not happening and cannot happen in some cases until this office is there. Also, the Office of Inspector General still has the authority to investigate any agency. So we are talking about like jurisdiction and whether they can see this or see that. They have access to the report at the same time that the commissioner does, and they have access to the files should they request them. They have access to information on the investigations should they request them. They are that oversight authority, but they are maybe not the person who is going to be doing the immediate investigation. And the reason for that is because there is a federal statute that says that anybody who disperses Medicaid funds has to have somebody there who can oversee that. And that is what the IG does for, in existence right now within our state agency. So that does not mean that the Inspector General will not have teeth. It doesn't mean that they can't investigate. It doesn't mean that they don't have access to the agencies. It means that the people who already have that expertise and that ability to investigate internally as they need to do can still do that work alongside a new Office of Inspector General. If anybody is concerned about whether or not these exceptions have gone too far, please, our door is open, and we have taken, I don't want to exaggerate, but it feels like hundreds of meetings, maybe not quite that many, but quite a few. And so as we move through this, and if we see places that maybe aren't addressed that could be, there is still time for that. And I would love to hear more about what we can do that also honors the jurisdictions of the places that need to be able to continue to do the work that they're doing. This is something that is needed. It is something that people have been asking for. It is something that's being worked on both sides in both chambers. But it is good that we are doing this right now so that we can get the best bill to go forward. And like I said, there will be another stop in state local government where if there is something in there that we're seeing that's inconsistent or that needs to be cleared up, clarified, happy to do that. But what we're doing right now to fight fraud and misuse of public money is not enough. It's not enough. And the Office of Inspector General is there to try to solve a problem that we've been seeing for some time. For at least the last few years, it's been highlighted. That's the job of what this office is trying to accomplish. So again, happy to hear language suggestions. My door is always open. This is a very bipartisan effort, but there are many of us who truly believe that this is something that is needed in our state, and so we hope you'll consider that.
Senator Abler.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate all that, and I appreciate the efforts, Senator Gustafson in particular. I just wanted to remind you of if the bill still says this, on line 5.24 of the bill, it says the Inspector General does not have jurisdiction over Medicaid fraud, et cetera. And then on line 530, it says they not have jurisdiction over that. That's still in the bill as you design. Is that just, they don't ask, I think that's correct. It's still in the bill that way.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to probably go to Senate Counsel to explain how.
No, I understand the why. I'm just.
Senator Abler.
I just want to make sure that I still have the right words. And so it's already been kind of said, and Senator Rasmussen said it pretty well. But so the big money, the fraud things we've been talking about, where we've spent all our time, is in those areas. And so the OIG, frankly, has not done a very good job, the current OIG. And so if there's a way to have this be like an Uber OIG, where if we think that they've kind of missed the boat on something, they could weigh in. But it says in there that they do not have jurisdiction. And I think that that's what we're getting at. And so not to cause any harm to the project, but I think if something comes up and they go talk to DHS, say, hey, it says you do not have jurisdiction. Thank you. Have a nice day. I think that that'll be something that's missing. And I think it's the intent of you, so give them another ratchet up. But I can't believe that the feds wouldn't mind us having two people watching. And you can certainly comment about that.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Abler. I'd also like to point to you to page 5, 5.4 to 5.7, where it says that the Office of Inspector General, under their powers and duties, conducting inspections, evaluations, investigations of state executive branch agencies and programs according to professional auditing standards to identify fraud, make recommendations for changes to programs for improving effectiveness and efficiency, and protect the integrity of the use of state funds. So the jurisdiction is mostly about being able to say that anything within, any investigation within, Medicaid or Medicare, anything in CCAP or all of that is just lining up with federal compliance. We have to make sure that we can still protect our federal dollars and be federally compliant. So while the internal inspector general that we have to have is still doing their job with some of those programs, that does not mean that the inspector general will not be able to access that, or if they suspect that the agency isn't doing the job they're supposed to be doing with those funds, they can investigate the agency. And that is the level of oversight that the office would provide that isn't currently there.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Abler.
I think I'm not going to argue with you all day. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but on line 5.24, it says exceptions. And that's a pretty important word. Did that word get taken out? Yeah. Right. Right. I get it. So, but I've been here 26 years. And if you want to stack up the OLA reports on fraud, they are a tall stack, and every time there's lack of compliance. And so if we say DHS, the agency, has failed to investigate this, then the commissioner will go thank you very much. We're going to go back and working on our workshop. I just think that having a duplicative layer on top as a default option benefits what you're about. Because I think that's what you're hearing. That's why I voted no on the amendment, just as a statement. But I think that as you're working your group, I think this should be a uber OIG there. Leave them alone. If they're great, then just let them go. But this says they may not do it. So that's all. And so I'm willing to support the bill moving along today, but I think that this is going to be a big discussion. And I know that I prefer what you're doing to what the governor's doing, and I want you to succeed. That's all. So I'm friendly to your thing. And at the end, you want something worth bragging about. But what's our budget? $40 billion or something? I mean, I hate to take that off the table. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other member? Senator Gruenhagen, quickly.
Oh, just wondering if it would be appropriate to make a motion to refer it without recommendation, kind of an indication of some of the concerns we have about the bill? Just my thoughts. It's up to you.
Okay. Senator Gruenhagen moves that Senate File 856 be moved to pass without recommendation and be re-referred to the State and Local Government Committee. Senator Gustafson and Senator Kreun, I want to give you an opportunity to speak before we move to a vote. As amended, I should say. I'll restate it before we vote. But Senator Gustafson, Senator Kreun, would you like to offer any closing remarks? Senator Kreun.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Circling back to your question about whether the fourth engrossment combined with the A39 amendment today would insulate DHS and DCYF, I think the answer to your question is yes, it does, and I think inappropriately so. My understanding and what my whole goal in this process has been is to have what Senator Abler has been talking about, an overarching Office of Inspector General whose jurisdiction is not limited to going in to investigate matters of fraud. Within that, there are certain federal considerations that we have to be cognizant of and be sensitive to. And where these embedded IGs need to be under federal regulations, I'm personally more than happy to accommodate that. And if that has to be spelled out, primary jurisdiction versus overarching jurisdiction, however you define it, that's fine. Or whether it's through interagency agreements. But when you look at the A39 and it talks about how, the interagency agreements must enter, it must under the fourth engrossment, but now it's saying that they can't even go into these jurisdictional areas without the express written consent of the commissioner. I think that's where, those two things combined, I think clearly does, insulate the agencies. So I think Senator Gruenhagen's suggestion is appropriate here, that this does get referred without recommendation, because I think Minnesotans expect some work to be done on these exceptions so that the jurisdiction of the Office of Inspector General is not limited, and that the Office of Inspector General can go into these areas as kind of an overarching jurisdiction to make sure and have some redundancy. There's nothing wrong with having some redundancy when it comes to these matters of serious fraud. So that's my comment. I think the motion, from my perspective as a co-author, would be appropriate.
Senator Gustafson, any remarks before we go to a vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't disagree. I hope everybody, especially people in this committee who listen to bills all the time and you're in this realm, understand and maybe appreciate the fine line we're trying to walk. Because I agree. I want an inspector general who has unfettered access to the agencies. And I believe that that's what is at the heart of this bill. And so, if we need to if we need to wordsmith it differently, if we need to go back and reevaluate some of it, sure, absolutely. But again, I hope you could appreciate the line we're trying to walk, because some of what you're talking about isn't possible because of federal regulations. And some of what you're talking about, we could go back and look at and craft the language differently. But it is it's a tough road to walk when you have to make sure that you are lining up with what the federal law says in this, in the Department of Health and Human Services, and also have a truly independent oversight authority over where public funds are being spent. And I can appreciate both of the things, but that's why this is a complicated bill. That's why it does take a lot of meetings, and why it has a lot of committee stops, because it's an important bill. We want to make sure we get it right. I would recommend that it pass just as is, but I understand. I think as long as the work doesn't stop, then that's okay.
Thank you, Senator Gustafson. Senator Brad, I wanted to make sure I gave him the last comment, but I'll.
Yeah, I just said it.
Senator Abler.
And I didn't mean to step on your closing speeches, but just a thought going forward here as the person that raised the point. On 524, if you just insert the word primary in front of jurisdiction in all those sites, I think we're good to go. And if you want to have an amendment right now to that effect, then I think we'll move to pass it out with recommendation, if you want to do that, or if you want to work on that in your own meetings. But I think that word solves a lot of everybody's, and it gets exactly what you're after, Senator Gustafson and your crews.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so I'm clear, in front of, starting at 5.24, the exceptions, I guess I'm looking at the fourth engrossment and not the amendment. I think that this is correct with you,
It's
though.
the fourth engrossment.
Okay, so adding the word primary before all of jurisdiction.
Yeah, all those jurisdictions.
Senator Gustafson.
And then thank you, Mr. Chair, I would just lean on council to maybe explain what that would look like, and if that's possible.
Do you want, we can move that, should I move that?
Senator Abler.
What's your pleasure, Mr. Chair? Do you want to work on this?
Senator Abler, it's up to the committee as to how they'd like to debate this bill.
I have a question.
Senator Gustafson, would you appreciate that motion today, or do you want to work on it on the way to the next committee?
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Abler. If the Senate Council can tell us if that works, if that's a workable solution, then I'm okay with that, unless Senator.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Senator Kreun.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Abler, I think that is exactly what I was getting at with my comments, and I would appreciate an amendment such as that. However, now that the committee has passed the A39, particularly lines 2.3 to 2.5 of the A39, that would need to be changed as well, because basically that would still prohibit the OIG from going into those investigations, it seems to me, or at least it would create some confusion. So if we're going to create a system where we insert primary in front of jurisdiction in section 5 subdivision 2, I think we also need to work on the language in the A39, and whether that can be done now.
Let me not make a motion now. Let them work on that. I think they know our intent. I'm happy to vote for any version of a motion with that spirit of intent by the authors.
Thank you, Senator Abler. Yes, we do have a motion from the committee. Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I ask council, I apologize, I'm so sorry. I'm looking for clarification on what the federal law prohibits us from doing or allows us to do? Because I understand, Senator Kreun and Senator Abler, what you're getting at. I definitely get that. But from what I'm hearing is that when we have federal Medicaid programs, we have to have one OIG housed in the agency that administers the Medicaid dollars. And so duplicating that would threaten our Medicaid dollars because we're not complying with the federal law that requires us to have one in the agency that is administering the Medicaid dollars. And so I just want to understand if I'm understanding that correctly, or is it ambiguous?
Ms. Hoffman.
Mr. Chair, Senator McEwen, federal law, from my understanding, I'm not the Medicaid counsel, but I do CCAP, and they run fairly similarly with the federal regulations. The federal law requires DHS as the lead agency and provider of funds for a Medicaid program to house a program integrity unit, fraud prevention within their department. From my understanding, it does not prohibit an additional agency to also do those investigations. It just requires DHS to have that. It also requires there to be a separate entity also looking at Medicaid fraud, and I believe that's currently within our Attorney General's office. And our Child Care Assistance Program, I believe, runs the same way, where DCYF is required to have these fraud program integrity functions within their department, but it does not prohibit any other agency to also conduct those investigations.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Senator McEwen, any follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so did I hear you right that the Attorney General also has this unit? So this would be the third layer?
Ms. Hoffman.
Mr. Chair, Senator McEwen, yes.
Okay.
Senator McEwen, any follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think the thing that I keep thinking of is that the evidence that some of this isn't working is that that people wouldn't have found things. And so I guess I'm really struggling with this like duality of like we find fraud and we refer it for criminal prosecution and therefore it's going poorly. And so I don't know. I'm just really struggling with adding a third layer of the separate agency so we could have 3 investigations going on Medicaid, and it almost feels like it's everybody's job and then nobody's job. And I don't want people being like, I thought they were, I just worry about that. But I think we should move this on to the next committee.
Thank you, Senator McEwen. We do have a motion in front of the committee. Unless the bill authors want to say anything additional, we'll move to a vote. Senator Gustafson?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I thought we were adding primary before jurisdiction. Is that the motion, or is the motion something, I kind of lost track.
Senator Gustafson, we're on the Senator Gruenhagen's motion to re-refer to state and local government without recommendation. That's the motion in front of the committee, as amended.
But just to explain, so
Senator Abler.
We were going to add it, but we decided not to do it on the fly, to make sure it could be done well, so the next committee you can actually think it through and make it as specific as you want, given the amendment that was there. And so I chose to withdraw the amendment, but I think you understand the intent. And I have confidence that you'll do that, because that's what your intent is. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Senator Gruenhagen renews his motion that Senate File 856 as amended be re-referred to the State and Local Government Committee without recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. And Senate File 856 as amended is re-referred to the State and Local Government Committee without recommendation. Thank you, Senator Gustafson. Thank you, Senator Kreun. Senator Kreun, if you can stay there, we're going to go to your bill next, if that's all right. Okay. So up next, we have Senate File 2356, which is a Senator Kreun bill. If we could have the testifiers make their way to the front, that'd be greatly appreciated. I have Sean O'Keefe, Christy O'Keefe, and Janelle listed here as advocates to speak to the bill. Senator Kreun, welcome back to your bill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee, for giving Senate File 2356 a hearing in this committee. It's now my second time before this committee, and I'm happy to be here on a much very different subject than the last bill that we heard. Mr. Chair, this was a bill that came to me from a constituent, Sean and Christy O'Keefe. And the background here, Mr. Chair, is that the Consumer-Directed Community Supports is a budget program that allows families of people with disabilities the opportunity to choose the services and support that works best to meet their needs. And Mr. Chair, you'll hear from my testifiers that there's a gap in the system here. And that gap has to do with individuals that have developmental disabilities combined with type 1 diabetes. And that poses some unique challenges for my constituents and other Minnesotans that are experiencing similar situations in their families. And so the bill is pretty simple and really just allows for a budget increase of 9 hours in addition to the current 3 hours for assessed services, for a total of 12 hours of home care nursing to meet the needs of these families. And that's really all the bill does, Mr. Chair. And with that, I'm happy to turn it off to my testifiers to explain in more detail.
Thank you, Senator Kreun. Mr. O'Keefe, welcome to the committee. If you'd please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Great. My name is Sean O'Keefe. And I just want to, again, just clarify what we're here today, because the assessment that's given for families that determines the level of care need for the mentally disabled is completely missing the combination of type 1 diabetes and being developmentally disabled. Currently, they give zero minutes at all for this. So what is type 1 diabetes? Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disorder that destroys all the insulin-producing cells in the pancreas. Once they're gone, they never come back. Your body doesn't make any more. And humans can't survive without insulin. Why? What does insulin do? Insulin is a delivery system for all the energy your body produces. So it delivers it to your muscles, your cells, your organs, and your brain. It's like when your car runs out of gas, it dies. If you don't have insulin, the person dies. My daughter is here with me today. She's sitting right behind me. And she's amazing, by the way. She qualified for the National Special Olympics in swimming. That's going to be right here in Minnesota next year. So she's incredible. But I'd like to give you just a little bit of her story as a real-world example. So Kenzie was born with a chromosome disorder. It results in Kenzie having a intelligence level somewhere between a 4 and a 5-year-old. She can't read or write or do math or any of those things. She certainly can't manage a disease like type 1 diabetes. When she was 7 years old, she contracted type 1 diabetes, and this changed everything for her, for us, and for anyone that would ever be in the care of Kenzie. Kenzie now has a deadly disease that requires 24-hour care that she will never be able to manage on her own. So not only is she 100% insulin dependent, like everyone with type 1 diabetes is, she's also 100% human dependent. She actually needs someone to manage that disease all the time, 24 hours a day. She can't survive without either of those. It's almost like having a choice between your heart or your brain. It's a stupid choice. Kenzie can't survive without both the human and the insulin. For Christy and I, our priority is to keep Kenzie alive every day. It's a 24/7, 365 job, and it's difficult. And before I hand this over to my wife to continue, I have two last comments. Again, just to refer to the beginning, the current assessment provides zero minutes whatsoever to care for Kenzie's combination of type 1 diabetes and developmental delay. And my last comment is just I'd like this committee to keep this bill narrow, to keep it with type 1 diabetes. There might be pushes to add many more diseases to this that are all different. This bill solves this problem, and I just don't want it to balloon and become unpassable. So, Christy.
Mrs. O'Keefe, welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Christy O'Keefe, and I am Kenzie's mom. Our challenge with the services we are receiving is that due to Kenzie needing insulin and careful monitoring of her diabetes throughout the entire day, Per Minnesota law, a nurse is required to care for Kenzie, yet her waiver does not fund nursing care. This gap in funding is causing significant challenges for our family and others in similar situations. In our meeting with Anoka County and DHS, there has never been a disagreement on the fact that Kenzie is not getting the care she's needed. However, when exploring options for Kenzie's care, we were presented with two options. One, institutional care, which would cost $400,000 to $500,000 per year, if not more, and is not the least restrictive environment for Kenzie. Or number two, writing a bill to address this issue. We are advocating for the proposed bill, which does not ask for 24-hour care, but rather a shared responsibility. The exemption would require 9 hours of nursing care per day at the current home nurse care rate. While the number of people impacted by this change may not be large, the impact on families is profound. My husband, Sean, has had to discontinue working to care for Kenzie. As parents, we will eventually age out, or worse, something tragic could happen to us. Without this legislative change, our only option would be to institutional care, which is not in Kenzie's best interest. We urge you to support this bill to ensure that families like ours can provide the necessary care for our children in the current environment in which they are thriving. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Keefe. And I also have Janelle Tybovich. If you'd please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony, it'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Janelle Trebojevic.
Thank you.
I'm here today on behalf of my daughter Lexi, our family, and in support of the O'Keefe family. My daughter Lexi is a 15-year-old spunky teen with intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities, visual impairment, in addition to her type 1 diabetes. She's developmentally about the age of 10. She can read, write, and has math skills of a kindergarten to second grade level. So just like Kenzie, she can't manage her diabetes on her own. As Lexi continues to get older and begins to transition into adulthood, we are struggling to find and be able to afford care for her. As Sean and Christy shared, type 1 diabetes is a 24-hour-a-day disease. There's no days, hours, or minutes off from this disease. At a younger age, finding appropriate care before school, after school, and during the summer was easy. There were school district programs that provided nursing care and was affordable. It was the normal daycare rate. But now that Lexi is in high school, those programs don't exist. In fact, my husband isn't here today because someone has to be home to get Lexi off the bus and be home with her. Being able to find and pay for before and after school care and summer care for Lexi, now that she's 15, is next to impossible. Our jobs are now moving back to a return to work status. This means that working remote full-time is no longer possible. Last summer, my husband and I could both work from home. We were able to juggle managing Lexi's diabetes while we worked. However, Lexi's not shy about telling you how terrible and boring it was because we couldn't enroll her in activities during the day. She had other words for it, but I'm not going to share those. In the future, my husband and I may need to split using vacation days in order to support Lexi on school days off and during the summer. But as you can imagine, this isn't exactly how you're supposed to spend your vacation days. Anytime Lexi is enrolled in an activity, we have to remain nearby. So simply dropping her off and picking her up like you would a normal 15-year-old can't happen for us. We have to be there to manage her diabetes. This takes away time from our family, daily living activities, or even just time with my husband. Lexi's a very social child. She thrives in these environments, so depriving her of those opportunities is not in her best interest. While we are blessed to have some help from my mom, who is a retired nurse, she is the only family member and the only person we have that can help care for Lexi. This doesn't give us a lot of time to spend time on a date night, or doesn't give much flexibility when I have to travel. All of those activities are really focused around my mom and her availability. She's retired. She wants to enjoy her retirement and what happens when she's no longer available or around. So for us, similar to the O'Keefe family, our future looks challenging with many tough decisions for us on the horizon. To provide adequate care for Lexi, does one quit working to be able to support her in the way she requires? Do we work simply to pay for a nurse to take care of Lexi? Or should we be planning retirement for 3 and not just 2? so that we can ensure Lexi has appropriate care, which is not funded by the state. Please consider passing this bill to allow the nursing support funded by the CDCS waiver so our families can have the support we need to provide the appropriate care for Lexi and Kenzie without the financial and stressful burden to manage their care on our own.
Thank you for your testimony. Any member discussion? Senator Kreun, any closing comments before we lay the bill over?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I appreciate the opportunity of the committee to hear this important bill. I'd like to thank my co-authors, Senator Hoffman, Senator Gustafson, Senator Liskey, and Senator Abler for their support on this bill, and to thank Kenzie and the O'Keefes for bringing this matter to my attention. I've learned a whole lot about this issue that I didn't know before, and what was interesting to me is to hear about how this issue has really emerged since Kenzie is no longer in school, because when she was in school, the school nurse would assume a primary role of administering the insulin shots. And so, but now this gap has really been exposed. And so, you know, this has been an eye-opening experience for me. I'm glad to be in front of this committee. And I think that, you know, it's our role to make sure that we take care of the most vulnerable among us, and that we provide the necessary care for these Minnesotans at home where they are thriving, and that best ensures their dignity. And so I'd appreciate this committee's support, and thanks again.
Thank you, Senator Kreun. And with that, Senate File 2356 is laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. Next up, we have a bill from Senator Hoffman. Okay. Thank you, Senator Hoffman. We're going to be starting with Senate File 2542. And if we could have Cameo Zender from Pediatric Home Service make your way to the table, that'd be great. Thank you. Senator Hoffman, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And also wanted to note that the other body has sent over the Human Services Chair, Mr. Chair. Joe Schumacher is hanging out right there to the right of you. So, you know, I'm grateful. So we have lots to talk about and discuss, Mr. Chair. So if you look at Senate file, there's a few things. We have an A1 amendment, and then I'll have an oral. We just noticed an oral. Actually, I'm not going to say oral because there it is. The A1 amendment. I'd like to move the A1 amendment, Mr. Chair.
Senator Hoffman moves the A1 amendment as an author's amendment. Senator Hoffman, is there any changes you want to make to the A1 amendment? Should we move to a vote?
We needed to delete the enteral formula and insert tracheostomy tubes.
Okay. The motion is on the adoption of the A1 amendment as an author's amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Senator Hoffman, to your bill as amended by the A1.
Thank you. Real quick, Mr. Chair and members, I don't think I have any more. That was it. There are two small items. We fixed that. The first, we fixed the second piece. In this one, when we're looking at rate changes that are going to affect July of this year, it's unworkable for specialty enteral formula providers like Pediatric Home Services. They are the only ones that are around here providing that level of specialized nutrition care for kiddos, young, little kiddos, right? This gives them more time to work with the manufacturers and the department on the reimbursement rate that doesn't give them a massive cut. The current rate works for standard formula, but not for the specialty formula. So really, this piece of the bill and the first piece, Mr. Chair, is no cost, and we have done a delay on this start date in the past. We have done that in the past. Where did the senator from Anoka go? And so we would haul, and everybody here supported it. The second piece, Mr. Chair, really is the department in the three very high volume products like feeding tubes and accessories and tracheostomy tubes. The hard code, this will hard code a rate that will save thousands of pieces of paper and hours of staff time. Imagine that being more efficient. Easy fix, simple thing we can do to help, and the care coordination and easier for families who really need the products to to stay alive and thrive, Mr. Chair. So one other note, Mr. Monahan, we worked on subdivision 13, this committee did, and that is to codify language. So there's a better organization in this section for years of change. The actual change we are looking today are subdivisions 13, 14, and 15 in the end. So that's a small fix there. But Cameo is here to give you what I missed. And if not, you have a handout as well, members, providing essential home health services. So there you go.
Ms. Sender, welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Cameo Zender, and I'm with Pediatric Home Service. I'll take just a moment to take a deeper dive on the two parts of the bill as Senator Hoffman introduced, beginning with the first purpose regarding enteral nutrition. In 2023, we were able to pass a rate methodology with your support that took into consideration the high administrative requirements, the delivery challenges, and the clinical support that is unique to enteral nutrition as compared more generally to medical supplies. Unfortunately, that methodology has certain provider requirements and claims requirements that aren't triggered for these highly specialized pediatric nutritional products. These are products that are common to the population of children with medical complexities, but not common to the broader Medicaid population. To protect access, as Senator Hoffman describes, we retained the legacy reimbursement rates for those specialized products. We're seeking for a 2-year extension of those legacy rates, during which time we're committed to working with the department to come up with an alternative payment model that reflects those same unique aspects of clinical nutrition, but further takes into account the pediatric population. The second part of the bill is to streamline the billing processes. The kids we care for are super special, and so are many of the products that they require to live safely in their homes. Again, those very common products to our population, but not common to the broader population, include low-profile feeding tubes, feeding accessory sets, and specialized tracheostomy tubes. The process for these is a manual claims process, and what that means is that we submit a claim and then we fax a pricing attachment. Yes, I said we fax it because that is the modality to submit that documentation. That fax is a manufacturer's pricing attachment. The department then must match the claim to the pricing attachment, calculate a reimbursement rate, and then push it through for payment. While this sounds clunky, it may not sound overly burdensome until we associate it with numbers. PHS alone submits 2,000 of these claims attachments every month. And for each one that we submit, so does the department also have to process. To further support the efficiency that can be found, for every 30 of these individual products in these 3 product categories, there's only one manufacturer's single price point. So there's a huge opportunity for efficiency. Said differently, by hard coding about 24 rates, we can automate claims processing for 20,000 claims every year. That's an 833 times efficiency gain for the department and for providers. We're asking for your support so we can get back to focusing on kids and their care, and hopefully retiring a few fax machines in the office.
Thank you, Ms. Sender. Any member discussion? Senator Abler.
Can you make the fax noise, Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Ms. Sender, can you tell me, when did we start working on this?
Ms. Sender.
Mr. Chair, Senator Abler, we started working on this in 2012.
Thank you.
Senator Abler.
Which I believe was the year fax machines were invented. Thank you. It just begs the question. I'm not going to take any time, but there's got to be a better way. You know, maybe if you had like carbon paper would be another idea. Thank you.
The carbon drums. Do you remember those carbon?
Any other member discussion or questions? Okay. Senator Hoffman, any closing comments?
No, just lay this one over, I think, for, but if you can make the fax noise machine, that would be great. So I can't believe we're still using faxes. That's good.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman. Senate File 2542 as amended is laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill.
Thank you. Mr. Chair.
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. We got 2443 and then 2439.
Do you have a preference as to which bill
I think
consider
we
first?
start with 2443 because 2439, our good Representative Joe Schumacher, that is a clone of what the House did. That's going to end up, that's the exact same bill. We're going to move that one to the floor. In 2443, we are going to lay that for inclusion into the omnibus bill, but in front of you is going to be, we'll stick with Senate File 2443. You got an A amendment, A1 amendment, which really amends out it takes out all the HHS provisions, which reminds me, we have some budgetary conversations and we still have gotten a conflict between the House Human Services and our Human Services, and I really need our corner office to talk to the House leadership who had worked out how it should look. And unfortunately, it's been, what's that, crickets. I'm still sitting here going, we need to be separate, as you and I have talked, Mr. Chair, about Human Services should be its very own conference committee because of the fact we oversee, I believe it's $20 billion worth of services and supports in that piece. So, Mr. Chair, that's all I'm going to say is I wish people would, have taken what I brought a few months ago and really took me serious, but apparently they didn't. And so I would like to know that I knew that, Representative Schumacher's over here. So what we're doing here in this bill specifically is 2443. And if you would please look at the first and A1 amendment, I offer that.
Okay, thank you, Senator Hoffman. Senate File 2443 is before the committee. Senator Hoffman moves the A1 amendment as an author's amendment. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no.
No.
The motion prevails and the A1 is adopted. Senator Hoffman.
Mr. Chair, the A2 is now the department then, because of what we did, there's some technical changes that needed to be done in this. So the Department of Human Services, this is the approved by our wonderful friends at the department on the technical changes side of that. So the A2 amendment is in front of the body.
Senator Hoffman moves the A2 amendment. Any member discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails and the A2 is adopted. Senator Hoffman.
Mr. Chair and members, this is our 2025 policy bill, which we would want then this portion of it to be laid over for possible inclusion in our omnibus bill. And that the highlights, which you guys can read about, really is the policy stuff that we've been working on. I don't know, Senator Abler, how long we've been working on this stuff? ICDD services during the day, the proposal really clarifies the rates for DT and H. ICFDD folks, when the care facilities ensure the rates are consistent with the historical rate, Mr. Chair, incurred in spending authorization. Technical corrections to residential access criteria. There's an elimination of the needs determination process for community-based day support services, which we talked about. We want to codify the informed choice training. Remember, this committee, we were the ones who came up with informed choice, right? This committee did, not necessarily the last couple of years, but it was prior to that. And so this just codifies it on the case manager side. There's the DCT separation statutory cleanup. That was accurately reflects where DCT or DHS, in some cases, both agencies are responsible for various functions. The cross piece in that, we are actually having that collaboration between the revisor's office and DCT. There's some technical changes to DCT program locations and the crisis services. That's in retained within here. And then also, we need to retain the medically appropriate bed for priority admissions. Right, in 2023, the legislature temporarily amended the priority admissions law, the 48-hour law. We've been talking about this for a couple of years, and it's always something in the process. But that's basically it. Christy Grom is here, of course. If you want to get in the weeds about deeper on that, she can. And Ms. Briones, Carrie Briones from DCT is here as well. So, Mr. Chair, the table's yours.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman, and I'll look to those at the testifier table if they'd like to talk or if they move to member discussion. Ms. Grom, please introduce yourself and proceed.
Mr. Chair, Christy Grom with the Department of Human Services. I think Chair Hoffman described all of the provisions that I have really before you, so we don't, unless there are questions, I'd be happy to stand for those.
Member discussion. Senator Uckey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do have a few questions, and I was just trying to compare them quick to the amendments that just got brought in I'll start with the first, and I go to page 5, lines 6 and 7. And where it says case managers must annually pass a competency evaluation, there were some words added, but if you could clarify, I'm kind of wondering why our case managers need to do this annually when they're working with these people every day, or when they're doing this work every day. And then are these some of these doing them annually an unnecessary burden? So I guess if you could start by just a little clarification, maybe I'm heading down the wrong road, but from what I see in the original language.
Ms. Kreun.
Sorry, I was looking around.
I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Chair.
and I was talking while you're doing that. My bad.
You weren't paying
Senator
attention?
Hoffman.
I was paying attention, but the clone bill, we were also doing the conversation because we want to make sure we get these pieces going in there. So Senator Utke, Ms. Kreun.
Senator Hoffman, would you like to respond to the question, or should I go to Ms. Kreun?
Go to Ms. Kreun.
Ms. Kreun, to Senator Utke's question.
Mr. Chair, Senator Utke, that's a good question because what you can't see in this bill is the session law that exists from a couple of years ago that that the legislature passed, which requires this exact same thing of counties. It's just not codified in law. And so we want to make sure that in statutes, so we want to make sure that statutes it's easily identifiable for counties what that requirement is instead of digging back through session law. I would say one of the reasons why the legislature and the advocacy community felt like it was important to have annual training is there is a lot of turnover at the county level, and we want to make sure that new case managers are up to speed with all of the new best practices, and that they are really tuned into informed choice and informed decision-making and employment planning and all of those important aspects that they're supporting people on our waiver programs with.
Senator Utke, any follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I understand where you're going with the employee turnover, but is there something we can put in here so those employees that are with us year after year don't have to do this? I hear and see so much of employees that work in lots of different sections that we touch with human services that, I mean, the number of hours they put in each year that's just repetitive. I had one that just told me about, I think it was, 12 or 15-hour thing that they had to do. And I was told, well, it's the 12th year in a row I've had to do this. I think that repetitive nature, when they're all working with people, that time is better spent serving the individuals that they're working with. So if there's a way to divide the newbies or the new employees, new hires from those that already know what to do. And I don't know how you want to word that, but that annual thing just kind of caught me as repetitive is costing us and increasing their frustration.
Ms. Kreun.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I see that.
Mr. Chair, Senator Utke, I think you're raising a good point, and I can go back to our team and better understand how we operationalize this training currently. It does say that it's a competency evaluation, which typically means like if you're competent, it's like a check yes, and it's not necessarily you have to go through every single step of the training like you would in a more prescriptive training. So we can go back and see how it works currently and then work with you to see if there's clarifying language that would be helpful in that respect. We certainly don't intend to create a burden for counties and lead agencies.
Okay.
Senator Utke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, I would ask that as you look at this whole thing, there's some other things too that have similar type questions or comments to them. I think that another run over this could clarify some of that language. So if going forward you could do that, it'd be great.
Senator Hoffman.
Mr. Chair, yeah, thank you, Senator Utke, and I would expect you would be working with Christie as Ms. Grom as your, because this one we're gonna, we're doing this as a process side, so we're gonna lay this one over. So we got till third, right? Actually, we got lots of time to work on this one. Not really lots of time, but she can come with you. The questions that you have, I'm looking, she's already making notes, right? Sorry, I'm looking at your stuff. I shouldn't be, but to that point, yeah, we always ask about, it's kind of like, with Senator Abler and the min choices thing, right? It was like, well, how many times do I have to tell you that I live with the same condition year in year, right? So to your point, I think this will be good for us to bring up then when we have markup, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman, and my apologies to members. We also had Mr. Josh Berg sign up to testify.
Oh,
on this bill, so I just wanted to make sure if he wants the opportunity to testify that he has that
Yeah,
before.
Josh
And
had
I have a
some
list of
stuff,
other
too.
members who wish to ask questions or have comments.
Yeah.
Mr. Berg, welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. For the record, my name is Josh Berg, and as many of you already know, I represent a nonprofit based in St. Paul that provides affordable, accessible housing, supports, and services to low-income individuals with permanent physical disabilities and brain injuries. We offer integrated community supports, community residential services, and customized living services across various locations in the state. Today, I'm here to address one specific section of Senate File 2443, or I guess 2439, and that is Article 1, Section 4. This section is a technical fix to legislation passed nearly 4 years ago in 2021. At the time, the chief authors hailed it as the best HHS bill we've seen in a generation, and one that will greatly benefit Minnesotans. While I believe these intentions were genuine, some aspects of the bill have not aged well, and this section is one of them, leaving me, Senator Abler, flustered, flummoxed, and frustrated, among many others. For those unfamiliar, this section added criteria for accessing residential support services and prohibits the commissioner from authorizing these services unless the individual has complex behavioral health or complex medical needs. Additionally, the individual's service planning team must have considered all other available residential service options and determined them inappropriate to meet the individual's support needs. Fast forward to today, and we have a system that cannot meet the needs of the most vulnerable individuals across Minnesota. This system is searching for solutions to serve more individuals, but faces a looming deficit in the coming years. It struggles to complete assessments or authorize the services Minnesotans deserve. It allows and even encourages the state agency to disregard state law regarding processing licensing applications and small changes to existing licenses. It operates in a vacuum, disconnected from reality and practicality. I appreciate the department including this technical fix in the bill, giving us an opportunity to discuss and hopefully delay or significantly improving the implementation of this vague and, in my opinion, flawed idea. I have many questions and concerns, and I will share a few additional ones to those that I posed in an email to the department earlier last week that many of you were forwarded. Number one, what are the definitions of complex behavioral health or complex medical needs? I couldn't find a single definition of complex behavioral health anywhere in 256B. Is complex medical needs defined the same way as it is elsewhere in 256B connected to CFSS or PCA services, or is it something new? How will these be determined, and what data supports these definitions? Furthermore, based on the proposed timeline in DHS's bulletin, it appears these definitions and the CBSM will not even be updated or determined until May, leaving less than 2 months for lead agencies, providers, and individuals and families to know how they will be directly impacted. Number two, Senator Uckey, this one is for you. What is the cost to implement these new criteria? What will it cost the department to implement these yet to be defined residential support services criteria in today's dollars, considering inflation and other cost increases since the bill was passed over 4 years ago? Also, and this one is for Mr. Freeman in the back corner, what will it cost counties to implement, and is this just another attempt to pass on the cost and to work counties across the state that already cannot keep up? What will the residential support services criteria report, which is also a part of the 2021 Omnibus Human Services Bill, cost the department in 2025 dollars? So in other words, will these factors require a new and updated fiscal note on this bill? I believe that they should. And third and finally, with all of the current issues facing the system, why is the department rushing to implement this new criteria after nearly 4 years and seemingly keeping it under wraps until it appears magically in a weekly Gov delivery update? Is this an attempt by the department, the administration, or someone else to limit access and ultimately cut services that many individuals need and depend on? To me, this feels like an additional way for the administration to cap services for our most vulnerable Minnesotans. Many of us have questions and concerns about this language, and it feels like many answers do not exist, are incomplete, or are based on outdated data from over 4 years ago. I strongly suggest the department pauses the implementation of this new criteria, or you, Mr. Chair and committee members, direct them to do so until stakeholders can work together collaboratively to understand and discuss the impacts on those who depend on us for their support. Don't let this be another waiver reimagine or CFSS rollout. Lives will be negatively impacted if this is implemented, and I hope you, along with the department, go into this with eyes wide open and accept that you know that this will not work as it was intended in 2021 when this was passed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Gruenhagen, I had you on my list. Do you still have a question or comment? Senator Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions on the bill, okay? I got a lot of questions, but I'm going to restrain myself because I know other people have questions. The first question is on line 8414. It's a repealer, and according to my information, the repeal program, we're repealing the program for evaluation of the Minnesota sex offender program, which my understanding is it's level 3 sex offenders. That's the worst kind, human predators. Why are we repealing the program for evaluation for the MSOP?
Ms. Briones.
Mr. Chair and members, for the record, my name is Carrie Briones. I'm the Legislative Director for Direct Care and Treatment. This language is included in the repealer because it is a function that direct care and treatment has never been funded for, and it was identified when we were going through the statutes with the revisor and going to checking to see what needed to be changed. And so at this point, we would require funding, but we have never engaged in this activity, and it was a holdover from old statutes.
Senator Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that response. It's, you know, when I was in the other body, I served on the Public Safety Committee, and we had the Commissioner of Corrections, I think it was, that oversaw this program. And one of the things he said, he started talking about the program, and I just asked the question, is what you're doing actually solving the problem with these level 3 sex offenders? And his response was, well, we're not really trying to solve it. We're trying to get them to live with it, kind of like asthma. Now, being a human predator is a lot different than asthma, in my opinion, okay? So I do have concerns about not evaluating these programs for effectiveness. Now, it's been a while since I was on the Public Safety Committee, but I don't, you know, we know the things that have happened in the state of Minnesota, and I know everybody's well-intended, but I do have some concerns about that repealer, and we want to make sure that the programs we're using actually will help rather than just get them to live with it, in my opinion. Again, maybe that's a little preemptive, but it's just my thoughts that I'll share with you. I have couple more questions.
Senator Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the next question is on line 4926, and it says that the Executive Board shall establish standard admission and continued stay criteria for state-operated services facilities to ensure the appropriate services are provided in the least restrictive setting.
Correct.
What is that changing?
Nothing. It's consistent.
4926.
Ms. Briones.
Mr. Chair and Senator Gruenhagen, it's not changing anything in current statute. That's part of the language that's being changed to reflect places where the department and the revisor had found where there needed to be updated language to make sure that that DCT retains its current responsibilities and authorities that it has as part of DHS now, and needs to have those after we're a separate agency starting July 1st.
Senator Gruenhagen.
Oh, okay, I think I understand that, but anyway, the suggestion I've received is that it should be reworded the least restrictive setting possible while receiving the appropriate services. Not sure about the implication. It was a recommendation that was made to me. So I'll just give you that for you to think through. The next question would be on line 8328. And the question that goes with it, we are changing this only to licensed programs as opposed to programs governed by DHS, DCYF, and MDH. We have seen a rampant amount of fraud in these programs that are governed by these state agencies. Why would we want to limit the scope of being notified, if I'm interpreting that properly?
No, it just is governed out.
8328.
Yeah.
Line 8328.
28.
Sorry, I'm looking at it.
Right here. So this one, the license, we got rid of the governed. You could check out the facility governed, but actually, it's heavier set is the license.
Senator Hoffman, who?
It's a CCAP.
Yeah.
Senator Hoffman, who would you like to take that question?
Yeah, I think Carrie, actually Christie on this one. This is a
Ms.
CCAP
Grom,
thing.
Ms. Grom.
Yep.
to
Mr. Chair,
Gruenhagen's
Senator
question.
Gruenhagen, I'm going to defer to council a little bit because we've been working on amendments, but it's my understanding that the OIG provisions of this bill, the underlying bill, were amended to be removed from this bill.
think.
My understanding is we have just the disability and the DCT provisions before us, Mr. Chair, but Mr. Monahan.
Mr. Monahan, and I can have Senator Gruenhagen repeat his question if that would be helpful as well.
Mr. Chair, members, he's on page 83, correct?
Correct.
That's
Line
a
83,
direct care
28.
and treatment article. But the thing you're pointing to was amended in the amendment.
No.
To now read,
Missed it.
when a person who is affiliated with a program or facility governed or licensed by, et cetera.
Senator Gruenhagen, any follow-up?
Yeah, always open to correction. Thank you, council. Was that pro bono, or do we have to pay for that advice?
Glenn makes a lot of money. Charge him.
Thank you, Senator Gruenhagen. I also have.
One last question.
Yes, Senator Gruenhagen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and then section 74, the repealer, it's MS 246B.04, program evaluation rules to measure outcomes and behavioral changes as a result of the.
Is that line 74, Glenn?
It's a repeal, section 74.
Section 74, I got you.
Yeah,
All right,
I'm
we're there.
sorry.
Thank you.
I don't have the page number right in front of me. I think it maybe is page 79. Anyway, the program evaluation rules to measure outcomes and behavioral changes as a result of the Minnesota Sex Offender Program treatment compared with incarceration without treatment to determine the value, if any, of treatment in protecting the public. So, you know, I'm a lay person. I'm reading that, and it looks like they're weighing incarceration without treatment to the value to determine the value, if any, if treatment in protecting the public for the Minnesota Sex Offender Program. Am I misinterpreting that, or could you clarify?
Ms. Briones?
Absolutely. Ms. Briones can tell you exactly what happened with that.
Ms. Briones.
Mr. Chair and Senator Gruenhagen, this particular part of statute has been moved to Chapter 246C, which was the chapter for direct care and treatment as its own agency.
So, Mr. Chair, I got a lot more questions, but I'm going to pass, and I stand corrected again. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gruenhagen. Senator Abler.
Well, thank you. And, you know, just this is a large policy bill, and a lot of it's technical, but not all of it is. So, and just as I was flagging it today, I just, there's a number of things, I don't have to have them all discussed now, but since it's being laid over. Just back to the Senator Utke's question, which I had flagged as well, it's not just training, it's also an exam. And so just to point out that a couple of my comments are actually making it harder to have people do the work. And I'm not sure that's what we're after. And so I don't have to, you already responded. But I think that's a bar that is maybe unnecessary. There's a way to work that out. On page 54.18 is the 48-hour rule that's snuck in here. So not that it's snuck, it's clearly marked, it's in there, which we discussed, which I object to that piece. It suspends the compromise the people being moved based upon available beds was supposed to expire June 30th. And that is repealed in this bill, so they're just available beds. And with all respect to everybody who's trying to solve this, there's no pressure then on the part of anybody to find those beds. So that'll be we discussed. I don't need to.
It's been extended, Jim, for 2 years. That was in the amendment.
Oh, it was.
Yeah. So make sure you look at that amendment, and if
Senator
it wasn't.
Hoffman?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I'm
that's
sorry.
fine.
I was typical. We're having conversation on this.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, that was extended, Jim, and I make sure that language. If not, then when we do the markup on that, but that was extended in there. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, never
you're
mind.
good.
I'm going to go to Mr. Monahan just to clarify on that.
It should be.
Mr. Chair, Senator Abler, on the A1, it's on line 2.10.
Well, I trust you.
Thank you, Mr. Monahan. Senator Abler.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I understand what dilemma that puts us all in. So on line 95.28 and 116.23, where there was a 2-year thing for some kind of licenses, and now when you get this licensing hub going, which I'm sure that's going to work marvelously, They're going to go to 1 year. Is that correct? So,
Mr. Monahan.
Mr. Chair, Senator Abler, you are now in Article 4, I believe?
line 95.28. Yeah.
Article 5.
Yeah.
That was
Mr. Monahan.
amended out of the bill.
Oh, okay. Well, fine.
Thank you, Mr. Monahan. Senator
That
Abler.
was a good move. Well,
It's a jurisdiction thing, Mr. Chair.
I know the amendment's timestamped like today, so I think. But anyway, and then I was going to ask about set-asides, but I'm not trying to take any more time than I need to. Is line 104.3 changed? Oh, there's time limits now? Is that irrelevant? Did that change, Mr. Monahan, or?
Mr. Monahan.
There's like something has to be done in a much shorter time than before for training, and I'm just nervous this would be a bar for somebody who didn't get a chance to learn that information.
Senator Abler, we're going to go to Mr. Monahan. Mr. Monahan.
Mr. Chair, Senator Abler, the entirety of Articles 5 was removed from the bill.
Okay.
Senator Abler.
Is line 107.16 also removed where you don't need a photo ID anymore?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes.
How about 117, raising the 8 to 9 to where you use child seats? That's out too.
Yes, Senator Abler, that's also been removed.
So are these going to the other committee? Is that what's happening?
Yes.
Yes, Senator Abler.
And then, so that's all gone? Okay, well, I'm sorry, I just didn't know, but some of those are not technical changes, and so for the other committee, then maybe you want to be noted that those are, in general, these policy bills are important, and sorry I didn't do the cross-reference on the amendment. But we don't want to have these changes make it harder. There's, the providers are having a heck of a time living on the rates we pay. They have a heck of a time getting their people background checked at sites that are inaccessible and not handy for the people to work. If they can find somebody who wants to go. If they can't get there in time, the whole thing starts over again. And then the people, it's just, let's just make it harder. And so there's safety issues, but please, as you go forward as a department and whatever bill you're going to bring this forward in, our system, they're languishing, and with the best of intent by everybody in the room. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll quit asking questions.
Any further member questions or discussion? Senator Aki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the questions on 117, the changes were nullified with the amendment.
Correct.
I do have, and I'm looking at 117, line 11 and 12, and I guess a question for the department, whoever wants to answer, but when it just talks about children under the age of, which would now read 8 in a motor vehicle, proper use of the child restraints system in motor vehicles, is that just seat belts or is it more?
Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was part of it. That's going to HHS, so I don't know the answer to that. That piece of this bill, that's what's being extracted to go to where you're the lead on in that committee. So we will follow up. Ms. Grom will follow up with you specifically on what that means.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman. Senator
I look
Aki,
forward to
any
that. Thank you.
So that's actually, you're going to be busy, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Aki, there's you'll be busy on the next, generation of this going up. So I appreciate what a great conversation, Mr. Chair.
Senator Hoffman, any further member discussions or questions to the bill before we lay it over? Seeing none, Senator Hoffman, any final comments, or should we lay the bill over?
No, I'll lay this one over and let's go to the next one.
Senate File 2443, as amended, is laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. Next up, we have Senate File 2439, which is also a Senator Hoffman bill.
It's, Mr. Chair.
And we have some amendments.
It's exact same thing. What we just did, we took this because the first thing we just did is Senate File 2443. 2439 is exact same language. 2443, we laid over for possible inclusion. We need, who is that musician? Tom Jones, you know, I'm a vehicle baby, make it anywhere you want to go, right? That, you know, that song, Vehicle? This is a vehicle for us to get to the floor, for our committee. So Senator Abler, you remember that? So there's going to be, Mr. Chair, A1 amendment and an A2 amendment, exactly doing the same thing we just finished. So I would move the A1 amendment.
Senator Hoffman moves the A1 amendment as an author's amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion prevails and the A1 is adopted. Senator Hoffman moves the A2 amendment. Senator Hoffman, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, same thing we did the last bill. I move the A2 amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any member discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the A2 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion prevails and the A2 is adopted. Senator Hoffman.
Mr. Chair, I would move
comments?
the Senate File 2439 as amended be recommended to pass and put on general orders.
Senator Hoffman moves that Senate File 2439 as amended be recommended to pass and placed on general orders. Senator Abler.
Just to clarify, so Mr. Monahan, you mean this big honking thing shrunk down to this little skinny thing?
Oh, that's, I'm
End of all
sorry.
that? Is that correct?
Mr. Monahan.
Mr. Chair, Senator Abler,
Article 1.
Senate File 2439 is only Article 1 from the previous bill you just heard.
Okay.
Senator
All right,
Abler,
so
any
just-
follow-up?
He said it was identical, so I feel
should have
better now. Thank you,
clarified.
Mr. Monahan. So I like the bill, it's perfect.
Any further member discussion to the bill? Okay, seeing none, Senator Hoffman renews his, or Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Hoffman,
Yeah.
why?
Senator Hoffman.
Mr. Chair, there's a good senator from Apple Valley asking for my intent on this. Is that correct, Mr. Chair?
I believe so, Senator Hoffman.
What do you think, committee? So here's what we need to do in human services, right? And the other body, the colleagues that you know over in the other body did the same exact thing. We're doing the exact same thing that they did in order for us to have a vehicle, because when we start marking up stuff, we're going to need a vehicle. And the only other person you'd say, hey, you're not going to do it, but this is going to work for us, Senator. And did I explain that right? Vehicle baby. We did this song. Who was it? Tommy Jones? No, it wasn't Tommy Jones. Who was it? Tommy Rowe, maybe? I don't know.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman. Any further member questions or discussion? Okay, Senator Hoffman renews his motion that Senate File 2439 as amended be recommended to pass and placed on general orders. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion prevails, and Senate File 2439 is recommended to pass and placed on general orders. Thank you, Senator Hoffman.
Mr. Chair and members, thank you. And keep going. I guess goes back to the order that you have in front of you, Mr. Chair.
Is Senator Hauschild in the room? Okay. Do we have, next bill would be Senator Fateh.
Aha.
Senator Fateh, Senate File 2055.
Yes, that's the work they're doing on all
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Fateh, we have Senate File 2055 in front of us, and I see is there a A1 author's amendment that you'd like to move?
Yes, thank you. There's an A1 amendment. I'll speak to the bill as amended once we adopt it, Mr. Chair.
Senator Fateh moves the A1 amendment as an author's amendment. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion prevails and the A1 is adopted. Senator Fateh, to your bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Senate File 2055 was brought to me by the Residential Providers Association of Minnesota and the Long-Term Care Imperative, and it seeks to address concerns that assisted living providers, particularly the small providers serving individuals on medical assistance, have with the statutory process for terminating a resident's assisted living contract. I know that both provider associations have participated in an assisted living stakeholder group with consumer advocates and the Minnesota Department of Health over the last 2 years, and that many of the issues this bill seeks to address have been topics of conversation during those meetings. I also know that we are still a long way from consensus, and the committee will hear both perspectives today. That being said, I believe it is important that we, as the committee, that have an understanding of the problems that providers are facing and are able to make educated decisions when it comes to finding the balance between protecting a resident's ability to stay in their home with ensuring the safety of their roommates or neighbors and the staff that have been charged with caring for them. And with that, I'll turn it over to the testifiers, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I have Mr. Bergeron. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Matthew Bergeron. I'm a healthcare and government relations attorney with the law firm of Larkin Hoffman. And I'm testifying today on behalf of the Residential Providers Association of Minnesota, or RPA-MN, a nonprofit trade association that represents small, customized living and residential service providers in Minnesota with roughly 200 members and subscribers. I appreciate the opportunity to provide comment on Senate File 2055 and a little additional context as to the problems this legislation is attempting to solve. In addition to representing RPAM before the legislature, I regularly represent small assisted living facilities as part of my healthcare practice and have assisted a number of facilities in trying to navigate this process. The current system where providers can terminate their contractual relationships with residents was designed primarily with older Minnesotans who may have increasing healthcare needs in mind in kind of your conventional larger assisted living facilities, and is not responsive to the high behavioral health acuity of many assisted living residents, particularly those on the CADI and BI waivers. Many people on these waivers frequently are served in smaller facilities, oftentimes 4 to 5 beds in a single family home. And in those instances, one resident with an acute or unmanaged mental health need or violent outbursts can put the safety and well-being of everyone in the facility, including the other 3 or 4 residents, at risk. This bill seeks to address a series of issues relating to assisted living providers, a series of issues that assisted living providers have experienced trying to safely serve their residents and then sometimes keep their staff and their other residents safe from violence. To illustrate this, I'd like to provide a quick example from my own experience representing a small provider. A couple of years ago, I received a call from a small provider serving 4 individuals in a single family home who had a resident whose mental health condition had very clearly deteriorated and had resulted in a number of wild conspiracy theories, criminal accusations against other residents, racist diatribes against the staff, verbal threats, and physical violence. The provider conducted the pre-termination hearing in early November that resulted in a plan whereby they would try to work with the resident while they transitioned them to a new facility. In December of that year, there was another round of baseless accusations that resulted in law enforcement investigations, as well as a maltreatment investigation by the Department of Health, both of which resulted in the allegations being unsubstantiated. At this point, the resident kind of lashed out, fired their ombudsperson, fired their case manager, and kind of refused to cooperate. In February, the facility provided a notice of termination under the expedited termination process. The resident appealed at the end of their 15-day window, and the hearing was held at the end of March. In mid-April, the administrative law judge affirmed the termination of the subject's affirmed the termination subject to the state's coordinated move statute. On May 1, the resident appealed to the Minnesota Court of Appeals. Both parties had to brief the issue, at which time the resident actually assaulted the process server who served them with the facility's papers. The Court of Appeals ruled the following February that the Office of Administrative Hearings did not abuse its discretion when it upheld the termination, and the resident even appealed to the Supreme Court, which denied certification in May. All in all, it was more than 19 months of litigation with a pro se litigant involved that had my clients defending lawsuits not only through that process, but also having to defend claims brought in front of the Department of Human Services, which had no jurisdiction, as well as the Hennepin County District Court, all the while trying to get a writ of recovery to actually remove the individual the facility. All of this is despite the facility prevailing throughout the process, the ALJ having ruled in their favor, and part of it was because the coordinated move statute, the resident was able to reject every alternative that their case manager, that the facility, that anyone provided to them. While undoubtedly this is one of the more extreme situations, and it's not representative necessarily of the experience across the board, I do want to point it out because I think it's pretty compelling evidence that the system doesn't work, that there are imperfections in it, and there are issues that need to be addressed by the legislature. I've also had clients who've had local law enforcement tell them that they won't show up anymore because they've gotten too many calls from one particular resident, or that they've had to try to manage medications for other residents who are afraid to come home to their facility. And so they've been trying to serve them while they're couch surfing at other houses just to avoid the individual that the facility is unable to get out. It's absolutely essential that residents feel safe in their homes and are secure, and I fully appreciate the efforts behind the law and the advocates that will talk to you today about ensuring somebody has those protections in place. But I just urge the committee to also keep in mind, particularly for these small facilities, the between 800 and 900, 4 and 5 capacity facilities, that somebody who has become that violent or somebody who has become that disruptive has a very significant impact, and the rights of those other 3 individuals and the staff that serve them to feel safe is equally important and something that this committee should consider. So I acknowledge as well that this is a work in process and appreciate the time today.
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. Up next, we have the long-term care imperative. Whoever would like to testify, please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Senator Fateh. For the record, my name is Erin Hubert, and I am here on behalf of the long-term care imperative here in support of Senate File 2055. So you will likely hear from advocates that the 2019 law was carefully constructed to balance resident rights while affording assisted living facilities with a legal process for ending a resident's contract. I think with the implication that there is no problem and nothing to be fixed. And as my colleague, Mr. Bergeron, said, the reality is the current process for if and when a contract should be terminated or if and when a resident should be relocated are too limited, it takes too long, or it's not financially viable for many assisted living facilities. As he articulated, under current law, an assisted living facility could pursue a contract termination for a resident who has assaulted staff, work through the legal process, including their right to appeal, and still find themselves in a position when the resident refuses to leave, even if a court finds in favor of the facility. All the while, the staff of that building are consistently re-traumatized. Unfortunately, this is not a hypothetical scenario. Our respective associations all have examples of this kind of situation happening in settings of all sizes. Assisted living providers have every incentive and mission to have a full community, so terminating a contract is truly a last resort. However, solely relying on a pre-terminations conference or the flawed processes provided in 144G are just not sufficient today. And I would turn it over to our last remaining testifier.
Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kyle Burnt. I'm here today on behalf of the Long-Term Care Imperative to support Senate File 2055. The Long-Term Care Imperative did a survey of our assisted living members about the transition process in November of 2024. Our results included responses from over 200 settings from across the state. Almost 25% of assisted living providers in the survey reported losing employees due to challenging residents, reporting an average of 4 staff lost as a result on these occasions. More than half of the assisted living providers in our survey reported having at least one resident in 2024 that they considered rose to the level of a contract termination. Our survey also cited challenges with coordinated moves requirements in 144G and legal process as a common reason ultimately not pursuing a contract termination. The survey also asked providers to identify reasons a contract termination was considered for a resident. These findings were consistent across size settings. Most common was that a resident required a higher level of care than what the facility was able to provide. This is important to note because every facility is required to disclose what services they can provide within their uniform disclosure of assisted living services and amenities. Other reasons included disruptive or violent behavior, risk of safety to other residents and staff, and non-payment or other financial issues. We agree that terminating a contract should be a last resort. However, our data make it clear that the current law and regulatory framework does not provide sufficient remedies for other residents and staff when that last resort is warranted. The long-term care imperative supports Senate File 2055, and thanks Senator Fateh for bringing it forward.
Thank you. And Senator Fateh, we do have two other individuals signed up to testify on your bill, but because of Senate Rule 12.5 that we can't meet during session, and I think they're going to go into session here in the Senate for a paper push here at 12:15. We're going to put the committee into recess, and then we'll, at 5:15, thank you, at 5:15, and we'll come back as soon as the Senate has adjourned for the day. Senator Uckey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I was going to ask that question, what our plans were at this point. So we will, when we come back, we will finish the agenda then, is that the plan?
Senator Uckey, thank you. Yes, we will take a brief recess with the call of the chair. As soon as the Senate has adjourned for the day, we'll come back, and I think we have the room until 6 o'clock, so we'll continue to proceed with our agenda. And with that, Senator Gruenhagen?
They said it was going to be a skeleton crew up there and pretty quick, so how long do you think?
Senator Gruenhagen, I would anticipate 5 minutes, so we'll probably be back by 5:20 or potentially sooner. With that, the committee stands in recess to the call of the chair. Committee is called back to order. The Senate floor has adjourned. We'll continue with testimony on Senate File 2055. Up next, we have the State Ombudsman. If you could please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chair Rasmussen and committee members. I am Cheryl Hennon, the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman. Today, I represent the Consumer Advocates Coalition, of which our office is a member. We have serious concerns with Senate File 2055, a bill that would significantly erode the vital consumer protections for residents of assisted living facilities that were established overwhelmingly by this legislature in the 2019 Elder Care and Vulnerable Adult Protection Act. We urge you to tread extremely carefully in making any changes to this law. It must be remembered that assisted living licensure and rights and protections it affords was precipitated by the shocking and horrific stories of harm revealed in the Star Tribune's explosive expose, Left to Suffer. The worrisome amendments proposed in Senate File 2055 are to a law that the industry, the Department of Health, and the consumer advocates painstakingly negotiated. As Senator Kreun Housley, the bill's author, said at the time, quote, "This is about our commitment to elderly and vulnerable Minnesotans and sending a message that no senior will be ignored in our state," end quote. This law is working. Because of the early intervention of pre-termination meetings, many terminations are avoided and only a small portion of appeals are adjudicated. In 2024, only 7 appeals were adjudicated by an administrative law judge, and in 3 of those hearings, the ALJ agreed with the provider that the resident should move. Senate File 2055's changes would upset a system that is working, and as you will hear from Ms. Henderson, a system that is protecting residents. We recognize there are challenges faced by smaller provider facilities. We stand ready to continue working with providers to address these issues without compromising for all other vulnerable assisted living residents across the state. Thank you for your consideration of our deep concerns about Senate File 2055.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Elizabeth Henderson. Ms. Henderson, welcome to the committee. If you'd please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Elizabeth Henderson.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Please proceed with your remarks today.
Okay. The con was on track. Or was I hallucinating? Was I just given a final home-going release date? No, I was not hallucinating, as I had been known to do after my surgeries. No, I wasn't hallucinating, as the excitement was escalating quickly now, all due to many, many inquiries regarding a real release date, not one given simply to shut me up. I had been given many release dates by Lake House, the long-term care facility I was transferred to by way of Hennepin Health Care's ICU and 4 emergency surgeries prior. August 2nd, 2024, the day I arrived at Lake House, and it was not September, and now it was September. One more inquiry. This time I was assaulted by the new addition to my release, the 7th floor Lake House long-term care, social worker had just told me that Runestone, August Anna Assisted Living Apartments did not want me back there. No one from August Anna Runestone had told me anything about that. So I called my daughter and asked her, had they called and contacted her in any manner? They had not. But the battle was now afoot. So in stepped the Ombudsman's office. We had no choice. I had been asking and asking and asking to be released from there. They knew, Lake House knew way early on, before September, that they weren't planning on sending me back to Runestone, to Augustana. But no one ever said anything to me. No one ever inquired or never told me, you can't go back there, until the social worker said, you can't go back there. They don't want you back there. Well, that meant, to me, in my eyes, I saw war. And it was on from there. My daughter, who has great skills in research and medical, she's been in for many years, got busy, and we got the ombudsman involved. And once we got the ombudsman office involved, things moved rather quickly. It was a big fight because the nurse manager at Runestone was the one controlling everything instead of the CEO. She said that I could not come back there, but she never contacted me or my daughter to say, no, she cannot come back. And my daughter was my advocate at that particular point in time. Well, at that rate, we were having meetings, or we were at least trying to have the meetings. We finally got one great big meeting, and when we got that big meeting, that was when I first laid eyes and ears on the nurse manager who told me, well, who said I could not come back to Augustana. And from there, one thing led to another, and here I am now, and my address is Augustana Apartments. That's basically it. I mean, there's a lot more woven in there because it was an intricate situation and when the ombudsman got involved, but it was all weaved out. And Brett, the ombudsman that we were working with, had clear, good knowledge of what was needed for us, because immediately he made the first phone call and said, you cannot do that, because she was basing her decision on, let me back up and say, I had an abdominal and a bowel preparation. And that was what got me into Lake House in the first place. The reason why I needed the long-term care. The wound needed to be changed daily, so forth and so on, etc. Well, the nurse manager was basing her decision on the fact that they don't do that kind of care. And we informed her that my daughter and I both had been okayed, certified by the doctor and the nurse practitioner to be able to change the dressings on our own at our leisure or according to the schedule that was set for us. That wasn't good enough for her. And she was coming from a background that was small in the healthcare system, but her current position was contractor. That's why I started off with the con was on track. Or, if you pay attention, it was telling you that it was a contractor that was telling me I couldn't go back home. So I began to make the plan to be homeless because my insurance had ran out also. And making that plan to be homeless was really when the ombudsman office got dug in deep, and like I said, here I am.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Any member discussion or questions? That completes our list of testifiers on the bill today. Senator Mohammed. Senator Gruenhagen. Senator Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Senator Fateh, now you've heard some of the concerns in the testimony from the ombudsman and then from a resident. So how would your bill, I will say I own an independent insurance agency and have a number of agents, and I have had customers who have been injured in a nursing home that had to have surgery from the resident, okay? So you do have the situation which was testified to, I think, earlier before we went on a break, that, just this one comes to mind. The resident constantly, and I think they weren't mentally completely there, but every time she went in to help, he'd give her a kick real hard. And all of a sudden, one kick dislocated her shoulder, or is enough that she had to have surgery on it. So, on the one hand, I see what you're saying in your bill, but on the other hand, you hear this testimony over here, so just wondered what your thoughts were, how we can bring peace in the valley.
Senator Fateh.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much, Senator Gruenhagen. And I could also tag in Mr. Bergeron as well after this, but the process, I believe, was designed keeping in mind our vulnerable adults, our seniors, to make sure that their needs are met, but it did not really take into account those with behavioral health issues, for example, and like setting violence. And we want to make sure that we're protecting those that are providing in smaller settings, but also clients as well. Now, just to be clear, this is just a conversation starter. This is to advance the conversation. This will not be the final product. Our goal and intent is not to harm our senior members in this process.
Senator Gruenhagen, follow-up.
Yeah, I'd just like to hear from the Ombudsman, based on his response, what your thoughts are.
Ms. Harrison-Hadler.
Chair Rasmussen, Senator Gruenhagen, I am encouraged by the fact that we keep the conversation going. It's important that we remain at the table and continue discussing the issues, and it's very hard for me to support any modifications to consumer protections that are in law. However, in this particular case, we do continue to see progress in keeping the conversation going.
And Mr. Chair, again,
Senator Fateh.
I had a lot of the folks that were concerned with the bill in my office today speaking about a path forward. We will continue those conversations, but we do see that there is a fix that is needed, and I think we can find that fix.
Senator Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Fateh, for bringing this forward. I think I will join the concerns of the folks who have been at your office, and I assume folks who have also spoken up against it. I think this bill goes too far, in my opinion, but I appreciate you. I think what you're trying to get at. I understand. I have got a few questions. On page 4, line 4.20, it says, when a facility used good faith efforts to substantially comply with the content or timing requirements of this subdivision or correspondence rules. What is good effort?
Senator Fateh, and we also have Mr. Bergeron making his way to the table as well.
I'll bring in Mr. Bergeron.
And if we could have maybe the page run out of microphone for Senator Fateh and Mr. Bergeron, that'd be great. Mr. Bergeron, welcome back to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed to answer Senator Mohammed's question. We can also have Senator Mohammed repeat her question, too, if you'd like. Mr. Bergeron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator. Good faith efforts mean an honest effort to comply. What this is attempting to get at, and I think this is one of the places where we've had a little bit of conversation even in recent days, is the instance where somebody has provided a notice of termination and maybe there's been a minor technical deficiency. But upon appeal, the resident's able to say, oh, well, we missed the one email address here, there's a date here, this one piece is imperfect, and therefore you kind of have to start the whole process over. So the attempt is to ensure that the resident gets the important information in there, and that would somewhat come down to the determination of the administrative law judge. Is this a perfect compliance standard, or you got everything, but you're right, technically it didn't have it had the phone number, but not the phone number and the email address of the Office of the Ombudsperson, for example. So that's what it's attempting to get at there, without necessarily, while still allowing that discretion that what is good faith is determined by the administrative law judge in that case-by-case situation.
Senator Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in your case, I appreciate you saying that. Maybe I can follow that. So is a 7-day notice, a 24-hour notice, is that considered good effort? good faith effort?
Mr. Bergeron.
Mr. Chair and Senator, under the current law, no, I would say not.
In the bill you're proposing, it does that.
Mr. Bergeron.
Mr. Chair and Senator, what the bill attempts to do as far as the advance notice is in a situation of an expedited termination, and there's a specific criteria in which those are eligible, that you would be able to get the notice of, not the notice of termination, but the notice of the pre-termination meeting would be able to be done within 24 hours. For example, if a resident were to physically assault another resident, you would want to be able to move quickly to have the conversation with the resident, with the ombudsperson, with the case manager, and the other parties involved about, hey, that would result in a termination. So the goal would be able to have that pre-termination meetings within 24 hours instead of 7 days.
Senator Mohammed.
Mr. Chair, I've got quite a few more, so I hope you can be a little patient with me. Okay, and in the example you gave, which is if the resident violates somebody or harms somebody, you want to move quickly, correct? On page 6, line 6.4, it says the resident has been charged with a crime where the alleged victim is another resident or employee of the facility. Charged, not convicted, hasn't gone to court. What legal standards are we using? And like, why are we, I guess, should we not allow residents to go through the legal process before they're removed within 24 hours?
Mr. Bergeron.
Mr. Chair and Senator, so the section you're pointing to refers to the right to return. So this is when somebody's gone through an emergency relocation. So this might be a hospitalization, this might be an arrest, this might be a transfer to a different kind of unit based on the care they needed at that moment. They generally have a right to return. This would seek to create a couple of exceptions, recognizing that their automatic right to return could have a very significant negative impact on the potential victim of that crime or somebody who has since sought a temporary restraining order. The idea is trying to, it's a starting point to try to find the balance between that individual's right to come back to the facility and the individual who was the, purported or alleged victim of a violent situation, having that alleged perpetrator come back into their setting, particularly as it relates to a small 4 or 5 bed facility.
Okay.
Senator Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's really helpful. Okay, so maybe then what you said earlier, can you sort of maybe explain what is your process in terms of removing somebody quickly if somebody alleges that they've been harmed?
Mr. Bergeron.
Is there like a proof that that individual has to give? Like what are we sort of giving? What are the options for that individual who's living there?
Mr. Bergeron.
Mr. Chair and Senator, under current law, if one resident of the facility alleges violence against them by another facility, or by another resident of the facility, the only thing that the facility can do under the regulatory scheme for removing the alleged perpetrator would be to hold a pre-hearing conference a week later, or a pre-termination conference a week later, issue a notice of termination. The alleged perpetrator, I guess, or the alleged violent person in that instance would then have 15 days to appeal, and then the administrative law judge would hear that at some point as their schedule allowed thereafter. So while the language in front of the committee today, I think, is definitely still a work in progress, the idea and the concern is that is weeks in which an individual may be living in fear of the person there, and trying to find a way to work through the coordinated care or the coordinated move statutes and the transition processes versus maybe using some of the criminal justice or civil order for protection kind of mechanisms as well, because that's like really the only other alternative, and that puts the onus on the victim resident to try and pursue that.
Senator Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe this is a question for you. Where is this bill headed next?
Thank you, Senator Mohammed. Our plan for today is to lay it over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill, and so that's the plan for the bill today. Senator Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this bill should either go to Housing or Judiciary.
Thank you, Senator Mohammed. If a provision that's relevant to those committees remains in a bill, that an omnibus bill, it's my understanding that Senator Hoffman intends to move it to that committee. Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the good senator from Minneapolis's point, yeah, that's absolutely, there's some provisions in here that we are just going to, before we go into an omnibus, when we do our markup, we're going to remove those sections out because, and that then allows this conversation to continue on what we're seeing here. And thank you to the ombudsman saying it's working. People are having conversations, and I think, to me, that makes more sense than getting it up to go into the next radiation, and we can remove that language, which we will do when we do our markups before we create an omnibus bill. So then it stays within this community jurisdiction and allows these guys to keep talking. Does that make sense to you?
Senator Mohammed?
That makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Chair. And, I hope that the parts that are going to go to judiciary do go to judiciary before this bill is fully taken up. And Senator Fateh, I really hope that you work with the folks who are opposing this bill. I think the current law as it is was closely negotiated. And I think there's a number of articles out there about why this came forward. And I think folks should read that, because I think if we just kind of let this bill as it is, I think it will harm our most vulnerable communities. But I really appreciate you for bringing it forward today.
Any further member? Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Fateh, sometimes, you're the legislator who has to bring the opposing parties into the room and hammer everything out. So I do not relish that position for you right now, but don't love the bill. And I think this is more for your testifier than for you. This is a technical question first. Is there a difference between housing or services and an assisted living contract statutorily?
Mr. Bergeron.
Mr. Chair and Senator, I think there I would actually defer to one of the other provider group colleagues who had more involvement in those portions of the bill, if that would be acceptable.
Mr. Chair.
Senator McQuaid.
May I ask Liam or Mr. Monahan?
Senator McQuaid, could you point out what page and line item that you're referring to?
Yes. Starting on line 2.14, and then it's throughout the bill. So 2.14, 2.23, 2.31. There's a lot of striking the word housing and then inserting assisted living contract, or striking housing or services and inserting assisted living contract. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are those meaningfully different, or are we just interchanging some words here?
Thank you, Senator McQuaid. And we do have someone approaching the testifier table. If you would please state your name for the record and answer Senator McQuaid's question, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Ryan Usher. I'm an attorney at Rohde & Coffin. We exclusively represent long-term care providers, and so we work in the assisted living world quite frequently. So the distinction between assisted living housing versus assisted living services under the contract is a bit of a nuanced question, but in essence, an assisted living contract for a resident who has opted to and requires services would incorporate both. But for a resident who does not require services or who has opted not to receive services, that assisted living contract would only encompass housing. And so there is a distinction insofar as the statute is currently written. There is a mechanism for a provider to terminate only housing under the contract or to terminate only services under the contract. Practically speaking, that's not a frequently used mechanism. Most of the time, providers who are looking to move on from a particular resident will want to move on from the entire assisted living contract, but currently there is a distinction in terms of the ability to terminate one or the other. And the housing would just encompass the resident's ability to reside in that particular facility, whereas the services would be the medical services or the healthcare services that that facility provides.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate that, because that's what I was thinking, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't reading that differently. And that's why where I'm seeing the striking of, especially where it's services and then inserting housing and services. I mean, this is, some of these expedited processes are retroactive. So if you get taken away in an emergency relocation, whether it's to an emergency room or a hospital, and then all of a sudden you're retroactively discontinued with housing. I mean, I guess I'm just, the work that went into this bill, Senator Housley and her co-authors, the result of some pretty serious reporting, than to come back and say, we might be putting folks who have a lot of complex needs, might be in an ER, might be in a hospital, homeless. I mean, we just had a testifier talk about she was preparing to be homeless. That's not what you want to hear as a committee member when you have seniors sitting in front of you and the ombudsman sitting in front of you as well. I agree with Senator Mohammed's really good question about what good faith efforts mean. And I think there's going to have to be a lot of work to get this to feeling like it's ready for anything, because I also bristle at the idea of weakening consumer protections, particularly when it's seniors. I have parents, they're alive, they love me. I think they'd be real mad at me if we weaken protections for seniors, and then we're talking about potentially medically complex people who are living in assisted living. So a lot of work to do here, and I'd really like us to get to a place where I don't have seniors sitting in front of me saying I was preparing to be homeless, but we had some help, and I don't love that. So if we could do some work to get that ready before we take it back up again, I'd appreciate it.
Any other member discussion or questions before I lay the bill over? Senator Mohammed.
I have one last question. Can you help me understand why you're changing from 15 days to 7 days?
Senator Mohammed, I don't know if that's a question for Senator Fateh, Mr. Usher.
So I believe the intent there is really to address these situations where there is a violent situation that needs to be dealt with in an expedited manner. As it currently sits, the process, which is referred to as an expedited termination, say somebody maybe seriously assaults another resident or another staff member, that process is initiated by saying, I would like to have a meeting with you about your behavior in 7 calendar days. And so right now there's a reduction in a couple of the different portions of that, from the pre-termination meeting notice to the termination notice, to essentially ensure that we're able to protect the residents in that facility and the staff members as well.
Senator Mohammed, any follow-up?
No.
Thank you, Senator Mohammed. Senator Fateh, any closing comments before we lay it over? Okay, great. Well, with that, Senate File 2055 as amended is laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. Up next, we have Senate File 1916, Senator Hauschild's bill. If we could have any testifiers make their way to the table, that would be appreciated as well. Senator Hauschild, welcome to the committee. Senate File 1916 is before the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Today I have for your consideration Senate File 1916, a bill regarding non-emergency medical transportation. This bill would authorize the Department of Human Services to issue an RFP for up to 2 pilot county sites to test a web-based single administrative platform for non-emergency medical transportation services. Non-emergency medical transportation services across the state are managed in numerous models now at the county level, managed care, state fee-for-service, and through a broker model. A strong non-emergency medical transportation infrastructure statewide is important to ensure appropriate medical transportation is available. Without a solid base of non-emergency medical transportation provider ambulances are often used to transport patients, which doesn't allow the ambulance to be available for emergency calls in rural communities. The platform chosen for the pilots will have the ability for patients and caregivers to schedule and monitor rides. It will verify eligibility and level of service with the payer. The platform will be able to collect feedback from patients, caregivers, and transportation providers. Lastly, it will provide real-time reporting that is accessible to the payers, providers, and patients. And with that, Mr. Chair, I do have a testifier and happy to answer any questions. Oh, and I believe there's an A1 amendment. I'm sorry, I should have said that from the beginning. Thank you.
Senator Hoffman moves the A1 amendment as an author's amendment.
I don't have it.
Oh.
Senator Hauschild,
I'm sorry, wrong bill.
Oh, thank you,
No-
Senator
no
Hauschild.
amendment.
So,
Wednesday.
My fault,
there-
my fault.
Wednesday.
There is, Senator Hoffman withdraws his motion.
Mr. Chair, at this time of the day, there's no mulligans.
Yes, yeah. So, Mr. McAlpin, we have, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
Introduce
members.
yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Buck McAlpin with the Ambulance Association and the R80 Non-Emergency Coalition. We spent the last few years really digging into this after the 14 work group, and we really feel to pilot this. The governor has his proposal. We were here in your committee, I believe, last week on the rate issue, and we feel strongly, I think Senator Hauschild really laid it out, that a lot of our problems can be fixed with looking at a true non-emergency medical transportation platform. Not transportation software. We have seen across the country real platforms. Appreciate your support.
Any member discussion? Senator Abler.
Well, with all respect, this is not a technical bill. Maybe it's time, but would this include all the PMAP providers as well as the fee-for-service, or just the fee-for-service?
Mr. Chair, and Senator Abler, this is payer agnostic. It could be fee-for-service, it could be managed care, it could be 6 different health plans that worked in that model.
Senator Abler.
Well, Senator Hoffman, you're just trying to jam 10 pounds of cotton into a 1-pound bag today. Are there any testifiers from the plans that are going to comment about this? Or?
Senator Abler, I don't have anyone else signed up to testify.
And where's this bill going? Is it staying
This
here?
bill will be, plan is to lay it over today.
All right. Well, just to the content, what we have now is not working, except in the PMAP providers. And so it's the fee-for-service where the problem lies. And so this is worthy of discussion. I'm not sure I'm a co-author or not, but I appreciate the dialogue, and I know you're out of time. So laying it over is a great idea. Thank you.
Senator Recke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for a little clarity, when it's this web-based single administrator, is this a little bit like Uber or Lyft, where they're going to be interacting and connecting somebody that could give them a ride with those needing a ride, or how is this going to work?
Mr. McAlpin.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Senator Rookie, we've looked at a couple different models that are out there, and they're very successful in other states. They can be placed in long-term care facilities, hospitals, and the trick is the conversation around fraud and everything around adjudicating claims. This allows the right provider to do the right trip for the right payment amount at the right service level, and it also tracks vehicles from point A to point V, which has been real contentious in the industry of who gets the appropriate ride. So the software we've looked at, a couple different versions for an RFP process, is very powerful.
Senator Recke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for a little clarification, are they communicating with a real person or with doing this online when they line up their ride?
Mr. McAlpin.
Mr. Chair and Senator, we've seen it's both. Right now, the health plans, of Senator Abler's part, have call centers. They've tried some of the broker models that have been unsuccessful for them, and we think a tool like this to pilot, I think the health plans would like to see a tool like this. I'm not speaking for them, but it would have interest. But the goal would be is you would enter a ride from, say, the Duluth Hospital to the nursing home 10 miles away, and you needed a wheelchair transport, and it would say these 3 providers are close. This is the amount the ride would pay. That would come to you, just like Uber, as you suggested. You accepted that ride, and then we validated off geocaching that ride went from the Duluth Essentia Hospital to the Duluth Nursing Home, and it was 13 miles, and nobody accidentally billed DHS 27 miles.
Any further member discussion or questions? Senator Hauschild, any closing remarks before I lay over the bill? Okay. With that, Senate File 1916 is laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. Thank you. Up next, we have Senator Mann's Senate File 2522. And if the testifiers on this bill could make their way to the front, that would be appreciated. Senator Mann, thank you for your patience. And I see that we have an A1 author's amendment. Is that correct, Senator Mann?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Senator Hoffman moves the A1 amendment as an author's amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Senator Mann, to your bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So Senate File 2522 is a constituent-driven bill with concerns that were brought to my attention earlier this session, and you will hear exactly what happened very soon. It does several things. So Sections 1 and 5 will prohibit facilities from requiring that a resident obtain a guardian as a condition for admission. Requiring a resident to have a guardian tells them that they legally cannot make their own decisions. This takes away people's independence without any basis, without so much as a health care provider saying that this person actually needs this. Who needs and who does not need a guardian is not an assisted living administrator's decision to make. What they are doing is taking away someone's informed choice. The other thing that this requirement does is that it prolongs hospital stays. Hospitals are still very full with people who are ready to be discharged but cannot because facilities will not take them without a guardian in place. This is costing our healthcare system hundreds of thousands of dollars in uncompensated care. Section 3 says that if a facility changes ownership, that the new licensee must honor the current contracts until they expire. What we see is when private equity companies come in and swoop in and buy an assisted living facility and increase the rent or the amount of charged for services without changing any of the services. And if they don't want to honor the current contract, they must provide justification for rate increases. Section 4 says that if you are going to increase the amount charged for housing or services by more than the consumer price index, there must be documentation as to why this is happening. Consumers are paying $7,000, $10,000, $15,000 per month for services in these facilities, and prices continue to increase all the time without a clear reason. Are they getting more services? Are they getting more staff that are magically appearing? There is no correlation between the price increases and the quality of care or the amenities that people are paying. So when there is an extreme price hike, people deserve to know why that's happening. Section 6 was removed with the amendment. Section 7 says that people cannot be kicked out of their homes because they switch from private pay to public pay. We have heard from people who have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in these facilities, but as soon as they deplete their funds, they get kicked out of their homes. We are seeing that again as more and more facilities are being bought out by private equity companies and increase the prices without changing services, all of course to maximize profits. It just does not make financial sense for them to keep public payers present, so they kick them out, and that's just not right. So that's it, Mr. Chair. With that, I will turn it over to our testifiers.
Thank you, Senator Mann. I have Mr. Don Varney. If you'd please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Don Varney, and I'm testifying in support of this bill on behalf of my mother, Rita Varney. I believe her story is important because it is representative of many other individuals and their families who are also struggling with caring for aging parents and siblings. My mom, Rita, was born in 1929 and was raised on a farm near Pine City, Minnesota. She's the oldest of 8 children who all helped with daily chores of running a dairy farm. Following high school, she moved to Minneapolis, met my father, and together they raised our family of 5. Her husband, my father, passed away at 76 years old, and she lived independently in a house in Tennessee until my 2 siblings and I convinced her to move back to Minneapolis, where we could do a better job of helping her with increasing medical issues. At first, she lived independently in an apartment, and finally, at age 93, she reluctantly agreed to move to an assisted living apartment. And as we made that search, the most important question we found was, what happens if she runs out and outlives her finances? Her current residence, Broadwell Senior Living, was chosen after touring and interviewing at this place and other facilities where we were told that it was either a private pay only or there was a thing called elderly waiver. So after learning a little bit about that, we chose the Broadwell because their policy was what they called age in place. and it allowed varying levels of cost and care without having to relocate into a different apartment within the building, and that their expectation at that time was to apply for elderly waiver status. We considered this essential and went ahead and signed an independent living lease at Broadwell Senior Living. On that same day that she signed the lease, she fell just outside of the building and ended up with a fractured pelvis. Following several hospital and transitional care stays, she had a second fall that resulted in the need for additional transitional care that totaled over $20,000 per month. The mortgage for her first house was less than half of that, so I kept that number secret from her. I asked the staff at Broadwell to do a nursing assessment to allow her to return to Broadwell, then as an assisted living resident. They determined the needed additional service would add $1,800 per month. I was later shocked to find her monthly fees had increased to well over $7,000 per month, and the cost structure to me was confusing. I met with the executive director to find out what the status of their application for elderly waiver was, and was told that it had not even started yet, and there was uncertainty of when that would happen. It was a month or two later that I was told that Broadwell had been acquired by a new management company, and I submitted additional email inquiries about the new management's commitment to following through with an elderly waiver application. I received several emails with, "We don't know yet," or "It's still undetermined," essentially no solid answers for us to decide how to move forward. As a result of this uncertainty, Rita and our other family members are now faced with the rapid drawdown of her remaining life savings, the prospect of additional downsizing of her personal belongings, moving costs from a place that is well-run and comfortably familiar to her to a place of uncertainty at a different facility. For a 95-year-old woman, this is a lot to expect, and I suspect that this is not a unique situation and will also become one more common as increasing number of seniors survive into their 90s. We specifically looked for a place that Rita could afford and that would provide peace of mind if she does outlive her finances. This series of events has left us without assurance on either account. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Our next testifier is Susan Baster. Baster. My apologies. Welcome to the committee, and please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Susan Baster. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the chance to speak in support of SF 2522. My name is Susan Baster, and I'm here on behalf of my mother, Sharmelin Anderson, and my aunt, Carol Anderson. I am here today because of the continued stress our family encountered while our mom and aunt were in elder care facilities. I took my concerns to my representative, Kelly Moeller, who has helped create a bill to try and solve some of the problems. My mom was paying over $110,000 a year for rent and cares where she was living, and her charges for cares were going to increase $18,000 a year because of a new pay structure. The care she was receiving would not have changed. Ultimately, our mom spent over $500,000 before her death last December. My sisters and I advocated for our mom daily, and our fear was that if our mom ever needed elderly waiver or public assistance, would she be allowed to stay at this facility? They had elderly waiver rooms. This was a constant worry for my family as this happened to our aunt. After 4 years at an assisted living facility, she exhausted her savings over $400,000. We were told elderly waiver rooms were not available and we had to move her. I feel this bill would reduce stress a family goes through by knowing that they won't be blindsided by huge price increases, and if elderly waiver, the public assistance is needed, their loved ones will not have to move. My hope is that a family can visit their loved one without having to constantly worry about unexpected cost and the disruption of potentially having to move them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bastier. Senator Gruenhagen has a question.
Oh, I just want to thank Senator Mann and the testifiers for bringing this forward. I'll give you my situation, too. It happened to be with my mother-in-law, and she's in her 90s. She's 99 right now. And mentally, she's real fine, but, you know, physically, you do go downhill a little bit after you get into the 90s. Anyway, she was kind of coaxed from a lower-cost assisted living into a higher-cost assisted living because they had some additional services. So she finally gave in and moved. Well, then in about a year and a half, her savings were exhausted, and she was on medical assistance, and they told her she had to leave at, 90-some years old. Well, we got the ombudsman, I don't know if it was this one or who, but involved. Maybe it was you.
It was. Yeah. It was Cheryl.
It was. And we knew that the room next to her, which was a little smaller, but that it was available. But they didn't even offer it. Well, then once we got the great lady ombudsman, I'm trying to make brownie points here, involved, all of a sudden they changed their tune and she's still there now. So, I mean, this bill would fix that, correct? Okay, well, if you need a co-author, I'd more than happy to sign on it. It would help me out with my relation, to tell you the truth.
Senator Mann, thank you for that. We got, and then we're going to bring up, if you guys could make room, Kyle Berndt and Aaron Huppert. So, and Senator Mann, this bill, this is this one we're going to pass and re-refer to housing and homelessness prevention. So the conversations will continue from this moment on, is what I'm saying, just to assure people that this is not the final stop here. So, all right, Kyle, Aaron, whoever wants to go. Looks like Aaron. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Again, for the record, my name is Erin Huppert with the Long-Term Care Imperative to share our concerns in opposition to Senate File 2522. First, I do want to thank Senator Mann for prioritizing time today to meet with us and discuss her bill. As we shared then, we appreciate her opportunity and openness to continue talking as this moves forward. With that, we have concerns with sections 1, 3, and 9 related to guardianship and conservatorship. Both of those things are very complex and are generally related to providing services to those who have serious medical or behavioral needs. And so there are instances when pursuing a guardianship is the most ethical and best option for the resident as well as the facility. So we will take that conversation offline with the author to keep working on it. The committee has heard in previous hearings that our county assessment process is deeply flawed in Minnesota. Recent data collected by the Imperative has found that many counties are completing their statutory 20-day assessment only 10% of the time. And so elderly waiver applications often take over 160 days to complete. So while the vast majority of providers want residents to remain in their home, we cannot ignore the compounding impact of a lack of payer source when these things start to add up. Finally, the last point I'll make is about 70% of assisted living facilities that belong to either of the two associations of the Imperative have identified that they will need to raise staff wages and benefits to compete with the market impact of the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board. Although we and our members raised these concerns with the board when they were considering their rulemaking, the board did choose to go ahead anyway. And that is also why we appreciate the author's concerns about residents and their ability to stay in their assisted living unit as they transition from private pay to elderly waiver, as those types of mandates have an impact on the affordability for private residents as well. So we welcome additional conversation with Senator Mann on how to achieve a shared goal of preserving access for seniors in our assisted living communities. And I will turn it over to my colleague.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess, Ms. Huppert, I do understand that there are some people who have complex care needs and might benefit from a guardian or conservator, but aren't there systems that determine that and not the place where they live? Isn't that best left there?
Ms. Huppert.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, Senator McEwen. As a non-clinician and a non-administrator, I can only speak in some pretty high-level generalities, but it is my understanding that most facilities do every effort to work with the families to try to figure out that best path forward. And in very rare instances, sometimes it is the conversation of a need for a guardianship that help the facility figure out the next step in placement, help them complete the elderly waiver application for payment. It is not a first choice, it is a last choice. However, removing that option entirely also doesn't benefit the residents or their families.
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've done a lot of work in this committee to try to make sure that conservatorship and guardianship is a very intentional act that is, and I guess I'm just really uncomfortable with the place that someone is living being the instigator of that and not like the conditions of life, right? That is what usually brings somebody to that place. And so moving somewhere, I guess I'm just uncomfortable with that. I can save the rest of my questions, but I just wanted to ask that specific one.
Ms. Hubert?
And
You're good. All right. Mr. Burnt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kyle Burnt. I'm here today on behalf of the Long-Term Care Imperative to share our concerns in opposition to Senate File 2522. As Aaron said, we appreciate the author giving us time this morning to discuss the proposal and go through some of the intricacies of these situations. While the elderly waiver funding has significantly improved, we appreciate that 2 years ago, payment for services for residents still are not fully covered under those costs. The imperative continues to advocate for an annual increase, as seen in Senate File 1725, to ensure reimbursement grows to keep up with the growing cost to provide services. Limited housing and services costs increases to CPI creates serious headwinds for providers. When you recognize that there is no annual increases in EW as it is currently formulated, it does not set up a facility for success long term. The exemption process also creates an administrative burden both on the facility and the agency or board which will oversee these requirements annually. These are ill-conceived and could have thousands of units each year monitored for adjustments over CPI. These administrative costs will not improve the housing or services provided to residents. But let us call it what it is. It's a rent control policy. Economists have found that a restrictive price ceiling reduces the supply of property to the market. The unintended consequences of such a policy can be seen outside this building across St. Paul. As we think about how we will house and care for our seniors in the future, this proposal, as drafted, could have a significant chilling effect on future development of these properties. We appreciate the author for the opportunity to discuss it earlier today, as I said earlier, and we'll continue to work with the author and the proponents on the bill. Thank you, Chair and members.
Thank you. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my big concern is when I look at Section 2, we're effectively creating a rent control mechanism, and when we look at how that would be adjudicated, there's some language in here based off of the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers, and I guess I'm trying to figure out, why. Usually, like rate setting methodology can be very complicated, in this space and in others, and so I was wondering, Senator Mann, can you talk me through how you decide that should be what the limit should be in this bill?
Senator. Mr. Chair, so first, I think it's kind of wild for us to call it rent control in any way, shape, or form, because this is not that at all. You can raise the rent to whatever you want. You can raise it to $1 million if your heart desires. We just want to see justification for that increase. Again, the issue is that prices are going up and up and up, and there's no change in the services provided. There is no new tennis court at the facility. There is no new staff. There is no change in the meal plans. There's nothing new, but all of a sudden the price went from $7,000 to $10,000, right? So we just want to see why the price went up. That's it. No one is saying here that you cannot increase the price. So to call it rent control is just not accurate. I just want to set the table there. And why the CPI? Honestly, I don't know. I think we have someone perhaps in the audience who can answer that question.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Mann. And I guess just concerned about not knowing the rationale for why we're including CPI as that kind of benchmark. And I guess my question, Mr. Chair, to Senator Mann is we also see major price increases from Minnesota's hospitals, from physicians, from other healthcare professionals, and so. Mr. Chair, Senator Mann, should we also extend that CPI cap to hospitals and other forms of healthcare?
Senator.
Mr. Chair, we should increase it to anyone who's just out there willy-nilly increasing prices that are not in line with the services they are providing.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Mann. And I think this is just like as we're looking within this space, we just have to kind of ask ourselves, what is our approach and what are we trying to accomplish? Because I think one of the concerns that I have, and we heard it from some of our testifiers today, is that if there is a view from folks that are operating and potentially even building and adding new assisted living facilities, that this introduces uncertainty, that perhaps even if they have an increase in wages or they're increasing the types of services that they're providing, that there is regulatory uncertainty around whether or not they'll be granted a price increase to be able to cover those costs. I just worry that we could see a shortage of these services for seniors who need them. And so, Mr. Chair, kind of similar to one of the other bills we had earlier today on, where there's clearly kind of a conflict between, some of the providers and some consumer advocates who have brought concerns. I would just, again, ask that maybe that important work be done in this committee, just given the implications that it has on, the entire long-term care spectrum. So that'd just be my comments, Mr. Chair.
So to that point, Senator Rasmussen has, and then we're going to go to Abler, but as that, this bill is slated to go to human housing, thank you, as it was earlier. Is it the desire to have it come back here because of the long-term care piece, or do you want to, what are your thoughts on that? I guess it's because it is our committee. I love this. This is the kind of work we do. So
I think it should go to the floor.
I love your attitude. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it should either stay within the committee or at minimum come back, because I think we just have a lot of open questions and concerns around the impact this would have. And I don't know, an additional question would be for Senator Mann. Are you aware of any other state in the country that has implemented basically a rate setting mechanism or a way to approve or stop rate increases even from private pay individuals?
Senator Mann, looks like you brought up the Sean Burke. You see,
I found a friend, Mr. Chair. But again, this doesn't stop rate increases. You can continue to rate increase, again, as high as you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to make sure we're seeing a justification for those rate increases. So if you're showing us a sheet saying the cost of labor increased and the cost of food increased, then absolutely, those are justified costs. And we're not saying don't increase your costs. We're just saying if you doubled the price of rent from 1 month to the next, and there's no reason for that on a spreadsheet, we want to know why.
Reasonable. Senator Abler, Senator Abler.
Well, thank you, and I think it should come back here. There's no other committee more suited to get the nuance of this topic and the history and then, Senator Mann, welcome to this discussion. When we did the assisted living licensure, it was took 2 years or longer, actually I would not call it rent control, I'd call it anti-abuse of seniors. So I've been in this topic a long time, and there are some operators who are marvelous. They are devoted, they understand the economics of their people, and they make every effort to move them from their retail, from the private pay and to elderly waiver. And there's some who have like 2 places. One in my former district. They had a 100-unit place, and the woman signed an agreement. You can stay here as long as you want, and after you go down to elderly waiver, fine. And then in the fine print, subject to space available, 2 rooms, which I thought was horrible. And that got me on a jag, Mr. Chair, of disproportionate share and commending different places that have 80% elderly waiver. This is a hard topic, and I'm glad it's going to come back. Sit in the housing committee. But I don't. The biggest complaint I get about assisted living is how come it went up so much again and again and again, and these folks are spent down to poverty, and I'm sort of, am I a capitalist anymore? I don't favor people making endless amounts of money off of the backs of seniors. I said, what does that make me, Mr. Chair? But there's got to be a time for ethics on the part of these senior housing people like Dominium, and where they get these tax credits, and the part of these people that are doing the corporate assisted living. And so where's the ethic, where's the conscience? And if there was that, we wouldn't have this bill. So I'm a friend to the imperative people. I'm a friend to the advocates of this bill. How do we find a way to help people not be spent to poverty and wind up on medical assistance when it's our dime? So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And to that point, Senator, we will request that bill come back to us after the next stop. So Senator Erin May Quay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Mann, I sent a note like 10 minutes ago asking to be a co-author on your bill, so I really hope I get to join. I think you're bringing forward such an important topic, and Mr. Chair, I do want this bill to pass, and I don't want it to get hung up on deadline. So if it goes to housing and we don't have time, it should go to the floor. Senator Abler, welcome to the team. Skeptical of the way we're maximizing profit on things that shouldn't be maximized profit for, right? There's plenty of things that, companies that should be about making profit. I think that's fine. Senior care is not one of them. And we do have this plethora of private equity buying up things that have no business turning up that kind of profit and being looked at to turn a profit. And I want our friends in the long-term care industry to know that I know that's not specifically you. It's the people who own you, and I don't appreciate that for you either. I have friends who work in healthcare, and they have their little clinics bought up by private equity, and they shorten the visits, increase the amount, but nothing changes except bad for the patients, bad for the providers. I don't think profit should be included in these kinds of things, and the more we can do to rein this in, the better. Seniors should not be spending their life savings away into poverty and then being told, like, just kidding, we don't have room for you anymore. I mean, it's just creating problem after problem after problem, and we can't sit here and pretend like we don't know where the problem is. I know that there are going to be folks who don't like it, but it's the folks who are doing this that aren't going to like it, and it's the people who need us the most to stand up to that. So thank you, Senator Mann, for bringing this bill.
That's great discussion, and it reminds us when we welcome to the committee. I love that. That's probably the guy 26 years he was doing it. I love that. That was good. But to your point, absolutely, as we sit there, we struggle with that conversation. I remember the good senator to the right of you had said, well, maybe it's time we start talking about equalization. Maybe it's time we start. I mean, we start asking the questions. That's what we're doing here, and I love that about that. So thank you. Senator Mohammed, you got a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Mann, thank you for letting me co-author this bill and for bringing it forward. I think it's really important. I've been sitting in this committee for this session, and I think the one thing that keeps coming up is sort of this reality that private equities are taking over a lot of these facilities, and I think it's bringing a lot of harm to the residents and the folks that are living there. And so I want to thank you for bringing that forward. But the reason why I actually became a co-author on this bill is the fact that somebody can be using private dollars, and once they're out of money and they go into public dollars, for them to have their lease not be renewed, for them to be kicked out, I think that's horrible. I think it's a horrible way to treat people. I think what happened to Senator Gruenhagen's mom is horrible. And so I think if we're not going to do anything about that, what is the point of us sitting in this committee? And I just want to thank you so much for bringing this bill forward. And when it comes to rent control, that's just Senator Abler's topic.
Dominion.
So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
You said the D word, Jim. All right, so here's the deal. I think we'll, Senator Mohammed moves that, right? Oh, no. Adki, I'm sorry. You got to throw a pen down here, Paul. You're like, so. Go ahead, Senator.
I've got a couple questions, and, I won't go into the fact that profit isn't a dirty word. That's what keeps them alive, so they can serve the people. But anyhow, I do have a couple questions where it talks about nursing home is prohibited from requiring the current prospective resident, but then it goes to the point, or continued residence in the nursing home. What happens as that resident develops impairments, et cetera? this just flat out says they can't do it. I think this is a little too restrictive, but what's the plan?
Senator Mann
Mr. Chair.
to the.
So there's lots of different avenues that can be looked at when someone needs this kind of thing. There can be a temporary power of attorney. You can contact the person's physician. You can contact family members. The issue here is that, again, the resident is being kicked out or not being let in the first place without a guardian in place, when there are other avenues that can be explored. And the issue also is that it is not up to an administrator in one of these facilities to decide whether someone needs guardianship. This is a decision made by someone who has training in this area, not by someone who just wants someone else to sign a piece of paper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess before I go on to the next question, but the thought of it is they're entering a nursing home. In today's environment, usually when we need that level of services, we're going to the nursing home because we need a lot of services and we need a lot of help. We don't normally just walk in on our own and say, I want to move in. So that's why I'm so concerned about the fact that it just flat out says prohibited, because, you know, many of us, I'm sure, have gone through it. I know I have, my family has. When you get somebody registered, all the paperwork you have to do to get them into a nursing home. I don't think many people do that on their own, and that's why I keep bringing this up. But I will go on to the next item here, and that's under the line 118, where it's the commissioner shall, and goes into the various things as far as the rate increases. I don't see anything there that says how long the commissioner has to do this, what measures, et cetera, that they would use to do this in a timely fashion. To me, I think that also, the commissioner, I don't believe this falls within their scope of what they do and their expertise. So if there's additional assistance along that line too, I would appreciate it.
Commissioner of Health. Senator Mann.
We haven't heard anything along those lines, Mr. Chair, but I can look into that.
Awesome. Okay. Senator Hudke, follow up. I think it's good. I think it's good. Everything we're raising, it's going to end up coming back is ultimately.
Yeah, and that part was good too. It does need to come here. It's got go make it stops, and we'll have more input, and then we get to look at the final version and see what we think.
Nice work, Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And a quick question for Senator Mann. I just want to make sure I understand the bill. So the Commissioner for the Department of Health would be the regulator in this case. Is there a fiscal note or a fiscal cost that they've shared with you in terms of what they think would cost to implement this?
You know what? Surprised that Senator Rasmussen asked that question and not Senator Hudke. You snuck one by him. That's like, you know, one of these where Hudke's usually the one to ask, is there a fiscal note? Paul, get on your job. Mr. Kyle Raymond. Kyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Rasmussen. So yes, a fiscal note has been requested. MDH flagged that there would be an administrative cost for them.
Thank you.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do appreciate the robust conversation on this bill today, and appreciate that we'll have another opportunity to take a look at it. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I'd move that Senate File 2522 as amended be re-referred to the Housing and Homelessness Prevention Committee without recommendation.
The motion is on the table. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The motion passes. You're on your way.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings up, because of the conversation. Here, go ahead, Senator Rasmussen. Go ahead. You guys can sidebar it, or you can talk about it. Why was that the thing? Because a lot of times things get worked on. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, and there isn't really a meaningful effect to that, right? Other than the file will be moving to the Housing Committee, but I think just indicates that this committee believes that there's continued work to be done, and we look forward to that continued conversation.
That's how we always look at it. Senator McEwen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. There's work to be done on most bills that leave this committee and go to another one. So I would have liked to recommend it to pass, but we are where we are.
You have to beat your friend from the next time. Senator McEwen, jump on. Welcome to the committee. Senate File 2149. Members, there were some provisions that requested this come to the committee. This is Labor and Industry Technical Provisions Bill. Is the governor's policy bill, I believe. Senator McEwen, this was heard in Labor and Industry. So thank you.
That's correct. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As you stated, Senate File 2149 is the Department of Labor and Industry's policy and technical bill. The reason why, as we're all aware, this bill is before all of you today is because of sections 1 and 7, which has to do with the sub-minimum wage for people with disabilities. And so there were a number of members in the Labor Committee who, out of deference to yourself, Mr. Chair, wanted to make sure that this bill was able to come over to this committee for a vetting on that provision in particular.
Thank you. And with that, it is a conversation that we had asked for plans. There's only one person on this committee that successfully terminated a special minimum wage certificate from an organization, and now everybody seems to be moving that, as Senator Utke's work in the past has shown. And so, and I did notice that there is no plan here. So, Senator Utke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And on that note, Mr. Chair, I'd like to offer the A1 amendment.
Members are getting the A1 amendment. Is that correct, Mr. Senator?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Senator Utke, the A1 amendment. You want to tell us what you're doing with the A1 amendment?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what this does is, as it was introduced, this bill was brought to us because of sections 1 and 7. And this amendment will just delete those from this bill because, as you have correctly stated, since this language was first inserted in the bill into law in 2021, the question has always been, what is the plan? We've all asked it many times. And as of yet, we did have a group from outside brought us a plan, but we've been asking that of the department, and we have yet to see one. So at this point, I would offer this amendment and ask that we pass it, because we do not have a plan, and at this point I will do everything I can to support those people that want to maintain their jobs, and they've asked us over and over again to do such. And so with that, I'd ask for your support.
Thank you. The A1 amendment is in front of everybody. Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to urge members to vote no on the A1 amendment, and I'd request a roll call, Mr. Chair. I want folks to know that we funded not only a task force to address this issue, but we already have given out grants specifically to implement the plan that was created and brought back. And, you know, we are down more than half of the folks who are on sub-minimum wage. You know, what, 5-6 years ago, every provider is working to end it and phase it out. I think the question before us is, are we going to match that in law? We have a lot of groups talking about how successful the transition has been. This is a phased approach. So we're looking at 2028, and so it does give time to implement the plan, but we have, I think it was $500,000 in grants to organizations to work on this, and that's working and that's happening. And so I want us to be really clear that, you know, there has been a plan and there is a plan and it's in effect right now. The question is, are we going to put law to that? And so I do oppose taking this out. Not only is this the right thing to do in the state, but it's happening federally too. And so I want us to, I'd rather us be ahead of the game than behind the game, especially when it comes to people with disabilities. But I just really, we're ready. Minnesota is ready. Providers are ready. And I think supporting them in law with what they're already doing is the best way to go forward. We already did it with money. We should do it with law.
That's what I like about this committee. We have two, you know, we got an issue in front of us, and we have, you know, there's opposing conversation on it. And I happen to can sit and show you anecdotal stories on why it's not working, because they haven't put a plan in place. I still have a child, a young adult, graduated from a college, lives in Champlin, was told he can't make it to work on time because Metro Mobility couldn't get him to work on time. They threatened his job. I won't tell you where he works, but he works across the river there, Senator Abel. You probably know where the place is. And it was like the mother of the young man had to quit her job in order to be the transportation provider. That's the systems plan we talk about. I can anecdotally go, but I think until we do that, this is why I appreciate this committee, because we can have these conversations. So Senate A1 there's been a roll call, and a roll call will be done. So with that, members, my clerk will call the roll.
Chair Hoffman.
Yes.
Vice Chair Fateh.
No.
Senator Rasmussen.
Aye.
Senator Abler.
Yes.
Senator Gruenhagen.
Yes.
Senator McQuaid.
No.
Senator Mohammed.
No.
Senator Utke.
Yes.
Senator Wickland.
No.
Mr. Chair, that concludes the roll call.
And 5 yeses and 4 noes, like our committee has done. The A1 is amendment and added. Thank you, Senator Utke. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move the A4 amendment, and I'm happy to explain the amendment.
Senator Rasmussen, members, are you handing out the A4 amendment there? Senator Rasmussen, as people are getting it, I don't have it. Go ahead and talk to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a important amendment that relates to earned sick and safe time, and I think this committee has heard a number of human services providers talk about the impact that different mandates that the legislature passed can have on their ability to operate. And so the amendment before the committee is from a bill, Senate File 2300, that I am a co-author on, along with Senator Seeberger, Senator Rest, Senator Frentz, and Senator Dornick, that makes some very common sense changes to the earned sick and safe time mandate. And I'll just go through a few of the changes that are in the A4 before the committee. First off, Mr. Chair, this would create a small business exemption for employers with 9 or fewer employees. The second change is that it would fix what they call the front-loading issue, which would allow the prorating of this benefit for new employees. So if an employee started on July 1 versus January 1, they would be able to prorate for that portion of the year if they front-load the benefit. And then we also have some common sense adjustments on the notice and documentation provisions within earned sick and safe time, including moving from a as soon as practicable standard to a reasonable standard, adjusting 3 days without documentation to 2 days, allowing employers to require documentation when it becomes available, if it was not initially available. And then lastly, we would allow permissive voluntary replacement worker-employee flexibility if an employee wants to voluntarily help find a replacement for their leave. And then lastly, Mr. Chair, and perhaps even most importantly, this repeals the more generous PTO change that I believe was made in 2024. That would make it so that even if an employer has a PTO policy that goes above and beyond the earned sick and safe time requirements, the current law, which is different from the original bill that passed in 2023, would basically require that those benefits accumulate alongside each other. And so these, again, are some common sense, bipartisan changes that I think help with the sustainability of earned sick and safe time. And I think will also help the providers, Mr. Chair, that this committee deals with on a regular basis.
Members. Senator Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to ask for a roll call. I'd ask members to vote against this amendment. I think walking back policies that we did in 2023 that we know are fundamentally helping the workers of this state is just, it's simply wrong. I think this amendment does a lot of harm. It asks for an employee to provide documentation if they call sick 2 consecutive days. And I think, I'd like to understand what strategies that would be used. Like, what if the person didn't go to the doctor? Why would we require somebody to prove that they've been to the doctor and that they're sick? What if they don't have health insurance? It's not like everybody in this state is covered. And so I'd ask members to not roll back policies that are clearly helping our most vulnerable communities, especially employees who are sick. Thank you.
Senator Rasmussen, to that point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Hoffman. I just wanted to point out the part of the amendment that you're referring to. So it's on page 2, starting with line 27. And what the amendment would simply do is it would change that an employer may require reasonable documentation that the earned sick and safe time is covered under subdivision 1 from current law, which is 3 days. The amendment would simply move that to 2 days. And so the only change in regards to that is simply moving it from if someone misses 3 scheduled work days to 2 scheduled consecutive work days, that an employer may require reasonable documentation that's already in statute. So I just wanted to clarify that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Senator Mohammed, follow up to that, or you want to go to Senator McEwen? All right, Senator McEwen.
Mr. Chair, does Senator McEwen want to speak before I go?
Yeah, if yes. So you want to go before her, Senator McEwen, or you want her to, the conversation's happening right here. Do you want to intertwine on what Senator Rasmussen in question that? So
Wherever you'd like me to I do have some comments,
you just got to look
Mr.
up.
Chair.
I mean, it's like if you want to comment, it's up to you. Is this your, would you like to comment?
Yes, I would.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Senator. I oppose this amendment, and I would respectfully ask all of you to consider voting it down. I know that there are some changes from the bill that it's based off of, but I wonder if Senator Rasmussen knows how many Minnesotans this would take rights away from who currently enjoy earned sick and safe time rights.
Is that a question to the good senator?
It can be, yeah.
Senator Rasmussen, you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator McEwen. And I do not have the information on how many Minnesotans work for an employer that has 9 or fewer employees. And I just would state, too, that what this does is that it simply would remove the mandate on those small employers. Their employers could still offer a earned sick and safe time policy or some type of leave policy. And so I don't have the information on who would be providing a plan without this requirement.
Senator McEwen?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
400,000.
It's over 300,000 Minnesotans who would effectively be disenfranchised with this bill. That's the number of workers who work for an employer with 9 or fewer employees.
Senator McEwen, this bill is coming back to you, isn't it? I mean, this was just a short stop to go back to you and to do, right? Okay.
Mr. Chair, it sort of depends on what will ultimately, though, it would come back to us, yes.
And I think the disposition on here is we were going to pass, whatever and send it back to your committee, which is where it came from.
Very
and
good.
I'm not going to do to you like state and local government. I went there to have a bill just pass through, and it was like a great conversation, which turned into, an hour and a half of, whatever. But
right.
Okay, so go ahead.
Just a couple of additional points. The law already allows employers to advance earned sick and safe time leave, so there's no need for that proration. There also the sort of more generous provision, a rollback. As I understand it, this was a requirement under previous law, but it was unintentionally repealed with other provisions of the earlier law. It was added back in 2024 because some employers, particularly healthcare providers and school districts, had created a system of sick time that included one bucket of the minimum required 48 hours of protected earned sick and safe time and another unprotected sick time bucket that could be restricted beyond what was even allowed under previous law, and the use of which could be counted against a worker in attendance policies that could result in discipline or termination. So all of these provisions that are in the law right now are provisions that are a result of a lot of negotiation with employers, and to see an amendment like this that would undo a lot of that and disenfranchise so many people, respectfully, I would ask you all to consider voting no.
Did you say, Senator Rasmussen, that there was Senator Rest is also on this this is a you and Senator Rest and Senator Seeberger, you said, and so, interesting. Senator McEwen, do you want to add to that point?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, I will echo Senator Mohammed's ask for a no vote. I think the thing that always confounds me is that we equate a person's ability to get sick and have paid time off with the size of their employer. There is no correlation between your ability to take paid time off and stay home when you're sick to the size of your employer. If somebody is exposed to measles, like if you have measles and you cough in a room and then you leave that room and 2 hours later someone walks into that room and breathes it in, if they're unvaccinated, they have a 90% chance of getting measles. It is highly contagious. So if you needed to stay home or go to the doctor to make sure you weren't bringing around highly contagious things like COVID, measles, bird flu, if that's going to jump to people, especially when it comes to seniors and people with disabilities and little kids. Like, we want people, regardless of how big their office is or their employer, to stay home or go get care. I just, like, it's like we're totally upside down when we're talking about the size of your employer and it relating to your ability to take paid time off to stay home if you're sick or if a loved one is sick. And so I just, the people that this ends up hurting, I mean, think about the parents who have kids with disabilities that split up all these like sick days off because, you know, no, their nurse isn't there to give the insulin, or, you know, they're not there to feed the feeding tube or the trach or whatever. Like, that's who this hurts. It hurts those parents. It hurts those kids. And it makes other people go to work sick, and then they get those parents sick, who get their kids sick. And then they, you know, so like, it's just, there's nothing about the size of your employer that has any correlation to whether you get sick or not. Everybody gets sick. It happens. The question is, are they going to go to work sick, or are they going to be able to stay home, care for themselves, care for a loved one, and still be able to pay their rent? And I always go with the latter. So I would ask a no vote because this is, it undoes a lot of health, public health for the state, a lot of public health for the people we care about most in this committee, and it just doesn't make sense.
Senator Wickland, and then Senator Utke, you're good, Senator Utke. Senator Wickland, then we can go.
Sure. I just wanted to say that I also oppose the amendment. I think, you know, given the context that Senator McEwen provided about how many Minnesotans would be affected by this amendment, I just think that that would be terrible to go backwards in terms of having access to basic sick time. The U.S. is so far behind many, many other countries in terms of what we provide access to in terms of sick time and paid leave, and to think that we're going to start trying to claw away at what, you know, very minimal level that we have established through this amendment is really discouraging to me, and I would oppose it.
Senator Fateh.
Yeah, and I'll be brief. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to echo my colleagues. I want to urge a no vote on this. Hundreds of thousands of workers will be impacted directly by this. We made a commitment to them to provide earned sick and safe time for them, and just to strip it away, I think would be immoral and the wrong thing to do. So I urge a no vote.
Thank you, Senator. We go to Senator McQuaid, and I'm just not reading it. I'm like, Senator, I knew this should have been, why wasn't Senator Seeberger? This should have been, this is where the discussion should have been in your committee, should have been at your table, should have been in that. I'm not should have been, and that's a shame thing. I don't want to do that. But these are like, okay, we're having that conversation here. I can tell you, this committee split like it is on lots of stuff. So, Senator McQuaid.
Yes, okay. I am gonna say this.
No, I was just saying, I don't think Seeberger's intent was that. I think it's really, there was some anecdotal businesses that needed to be able to do this, and it's like, if I remember that, and it just, I don't think it's had a hearing yet. Well, now, I think we should send it back to Senator McEwen's committee so they actually have that conversation when they do it, right? I mean, that's what I like about this. We just send it back. That's just my opinion on that one. So
the one thing I want to say, Mr. Chair, is that when I saw that this bill was coming to our committee today, I just wanted to say, like, okay, how long has earned sick and safe time been in effect? So it's been a year and 3 months. In calendar year 2020, well, 2 years, no, 1 year, January 1st, 2024. So in the calendar year between January 1st and December 31st, 2024, there were only 40 wage claims by DLI of all the businesses that we have in Minnesota. I just think that this is clawing back something that folks really need. And this program has really, it's been here. We have, let's see, it was a 1.6% return on assets, 6% rise in worker productivity. For every $6.87 per worker to provide the paid sick leave, there was a gain of $12.32 per worker. Worker access to paid sick leave increased by 18 percentage points over 2 years. I mean, I think the results speak for themselves. It's not hypothetical anymore. When we passed the law, we heard a lot of these things, but we've had it, and we don't see the world falling down, but we do see more productivity, more wages going, or more money going to businesses, and more people being able to take sick time off without, running the risk of getting evicted. So I think what we have is good, and I don't think we should undo it.
Okay. Senator Rasmussen, final thoughts, then we'll go to Senator McEwen for final. She's already said she's opposed to it, but if you want to get final thoughts, Senator McEwen, go ahead, Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the robust discussion on this. And my hope is, we adopt this amendment and are sending the bill back to the Labor Committee where it can have a fuller conversation. And Mr. Chair, I wouldn't be bringing this amendment today if Senate File 2300 had a hearing in the Labor Committee. But I think this is an important way to take some very common sense changes and fixes to the earned sick and safe time mandate that has bipartisan support. This is a bill that's chief authored by Senator Seeberger, co-authored by Senator Rest and Frentz and myself and Senator Dornick. And so I think in the spirit, Mr. Chair, of this committee and the bipartisan work we do, we can forward this bipartisan idea that does have a disproportionate impact on human services providers. And we can continue that conversation in the Labor Committee, where I would encourage Senator McEwen to give this bill a hearing and others to talk about how we can come together on some common sense fixes. And so I'd ask for member support to continue this conversation and this bipartisan proposal in the Labor Committee.
Senator McEwen, final thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the discussion. We have had a lot of discussion about earned sick and safe time, including in the Labor Committee over the last 2 years. Numerous people coming to testify all about all of the provisions. It has been fully vetted, and I understand that people want to relitigate some of those provisions, but I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think that this proposal that would disenfranchise over 300,000 Minnesotans, I mean, bipartisan or not, I think it's wrong. And so certainly if it were to actually get a hearing where there was a testimony allowed before the committee that was considering whether to add it onto a bill, we would see lots of people coming to tell you all about how they feel about it. But we've already done that in the Labor Committee. So respectfully, I ask for a no vote.
So you have, to that point, you have heard Senate File 2300 in the Labor Committee?
No, Mr. Chair, and we will not.
All right. So, yeah, sometimes, there's to that point, I always get, there's an old teacher from the Iron Range, Bob Bruckbauer, always said, it's good to have discussion. It's good to always have discussion. So with that, Senate File 2149, Senator Rasmussen moves Senate File 2149. The amendment. Oh, this is on the amendment first. God, you guys. It's late, Senator Utke. To the A4 amendment, there's a roll call that has been requested. A roll call shall be granted. The clerk will set the roll.
Chair Hoffman.
Aye.
Vice Chair Fateh.
No.
Senator Rasmussen.
Aye.
Senator Abler. Yes. Senator Gruenhagen. Aye. Senator McQuaid. No. Senator Mohammed. No. Senator Utke. Aye. Senator Wickland. No. Mr. Chair, that concludes the roll call.
The ayes 5, the nays 4. The amendment has been added to the full bill. Senate File 2149 as amended.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I move that Senate File 2149 as amended be referred to the Committee on Labor without recommendation.
Senate File as amended just, is this a straight-up call? As amended, Senator McQuaid moved Senate File 2149 be recommended and referred to Labor Committee without recommendation.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Abler.
what other choices do we have?
You know,
Like, where would it go besides the committee and with or without recommendation?
to the floor, I suppose. No, it needs to come back to, because there's some addition to it, I would guess. That's a good question. Thoughts, opinions? What are you thinking?
Mr. Chair, I think it should be referred back to labor.
That's what the nonpartisan staff, everybody that works on it, saying that should go back to her committee, so.
And Mr. Chair, this is a divided vote, and I'm willing to accept the no recommendation just out of respect for our co-members. So I think that would be a good motion.
I think that's the motion we put in there was without
Just agree.
recommendation, right?
I'm trying to agree, Mr. Chair.
Oh, God, I was like, did I miss something here? It's like, Senator Utke, Senator Wickland, did I miss something? Am I new to this? Are we new to this? That was good. All right, so all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you, Senator McEwen. It's all back to you. It's all yours. You may have it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was fun.
Oh, this is
Okay, looking at Wednesday, folks, thank you, everybody. We have Rasmussen, Senator Abler, your nursing facility rate increases establishment. I mean, if you can figure out if that fits in there. We have to bring Dibbles. That's going to be a lengthy conversation.
Yeah.
Jim, is the consent to electronic monitoring requirements modification. There's a lot of people involved with that conversation, and that one's going to be, I think all of us will be lengthy on that. But we
Mr.
have,
Chair, if you do the mine, it can be, I'll just have the two testifiers to be very short if
Okay.
you want to do.
You're
want to do
good.
mine.
I just
Okay.
want to look at the interest, because there's other ones, stuff that was landed today, we're going to have to hear on Wednesday. I think Rasmussen, I think you had another one. I think McQuaid might have a couple in that bill. And then we got the elderly waiver rates, nursing facility stuff, but I think we're good to go. Any questions, anybody? We're good? We're going to go back to 1200 MSB, is that correct? Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there. This is hard work, but it's good work. So with that, anything else? We are adjourned.